Lower your sword. Put the map away. The war can wait. Tonight you're not the dragonborn charging across tundra with a destiny to fulfill. Tonight you're just a traveler, finding a spot near the fire, letting the wind howl outside the inn walls, while the candles burn low and the world beyond the door turns quiet and still. Skyrim is not just a land of dragons and dungeons. It is a land of people, tired people, broken people, people who made one wrong choice on a cold night years ago and have been living in the shadow of it ever since. People who love someone they can't save. People who remember a version of the world that no longer exists and spend their days mourning it from the corner of some drafty tavern. Tonight, we're going to sit with those people. We're going to learn their names. We're going to hear what happened to them. 120 stories. Each one real, each one buried inside the game if you know where to look. Some of them are tucked into journals you might have sold without reading. Some live in single lines of overheard dialogue. Some of them are told entirely through the placement of objects in an abandoned room. These are the people of Skyrim, and most of them are not okay. Part 1. The Broken Souls of Ivarstead. There is a village at the base of the throat of the world called Ivarstead, and it is the kind of place people end up in rather than choose. It sits at the edge of the world, pressed against the mountain, too small to matter to the war, and too far from everything else to matter to anyone traveling through. The pilgrims who come through on the 7,000 steps barely notice it exists. They stop at the inn, eat a meal, look up at the mountain, and move on. What they leave behind is a town full of people who stayed. Story 1. Narfi. He lives on the wrong side of the bridge. That detail alone says something. Everyone else in Ivarstead occupies the main cluster of buildings on one bank of the river. Narfi lives on the other side, in what used to be a house and is now just walls. Walls and a bedroll, and the memory of a life that existed here before everything fell apart. His name is Narfi. He is a Nord man, probably somewhere in his 30s, though it is genuinely hard to say because grief and exposure to the elements have a way of aging a person beyond their years. He wanders the ruins of his family home all day. Sometimes he speaks to himself. Sometimes he speaks to the river. Sometimes, if you approach him, he will look at you with eyes that are very clear and very far away at the same time, and he will ask you if you have seen his sister. Her name was Rada. She used to live here with him, in this house, on this riverbank, and then one day she left to gather ingredients from the small islands in the river nearby, and she never came back. Wilhelm at the inn will tell you, if you ask, that Rada disappeared over a year ago, that everyone searched, that nobody found anything, that after a while people stopped looking, the way people do, because the world is cold and practical and the living have their own problems. He tells Narfi she'll come back. He keeps telling him this because he doesn't have the heart to say the other thing. If you wade into the river and look around the islands where Rada used to gather her mountain flowers and her nern root, you will find her. She is at the bottom of the water, a skeleton and a necklace, the cold current moving over her like she's been there so long. The river has accepted her as part of its floor. She drowned. That's all. No monster, no murderer, no grand story. She slipped, or the current was too strong that day, or the cold took her before she could swim back to shore. She died on an ordinary afternoon, doing something she had done dozens of times before, and then she sank, and the river kept her. When you bring her necklace back to Narfi and tell him the truth, something shifts in his face. Something settles. He's been living in a kind of suspended grief this whole time, caught between knowing and not knowing. Now he knows. It doesn't make him better, but it changes the shape of his hurt. What happens after that is the part that stays with you. Narfi has a contract placed on his life. Someone, somewhere, hired the Dark Brotherhood to kill this broken man who lives in a ruin on the wrong side of a bridge in a village nobody cares about. Some players believe, based on nothing provable but everything emotionally logical, that Narfi placed the contract himself, that having found out the truth about Rada, the last reason he had to keep wandering the riverbank every day was gone. That Narfi, in his grief and his clarity, decided to ask for the one thing that would finally let him stop. If that's true, and you go there to fulfill the contract, you will find him in his ruined home, and he will not fight back. He carries an iron dagger and never draws it. He just stands there, in the place where his family used to live, waiting. And if you search his inventory after, that dagger is still there, sheathed, untouched. Story 2. Rada. She deserves her own story, separate from her brother's. Because Rada was not just the sister of a sad man. She was someone who woke up that morning with plans. She had a purpose out on those islands. She was gathering things. She was, in some small way, building something with her days. There is something quietly devastating about the people in Skyrim who die doing completely ordinary tasks. Not in battle. Not in some heroic last stand. Just on a Tuesday, wading into a river they had waded into 100 times before. The necklace you recover from her remains is simple. It belongs to someone who was not wealthy, but who kept something beautiful anyway. You bring it back to her brother, and that simple piece of jewelry closes a story that began the moment she went into the water and nobody noticed she wasn't coming back. Story 3. Wilhelm. He is the innkeeper. He is the one who has been telling Narfi the lie. She'll come back, Wilhelm says. Don't worry, Narfi. She'll be back soon. He has been saying this for over a year. Wilhelm is not a cruel man. He is a man who decided, at some point, that Narfi could not survive the truth, and that maintaining a gentle fiction was the kindest thing he could do. Whether he was right about that is a question the game leaves open. Narfi is clearly suffering. He is clearly not well. But he is still here, still getting up every morning, still waiting. Maybe Wilhelm's lie is the only thing keeping him tethered. Or maybe, after a year of waiting for a sister who was always at the bottom of the river, Narfi might have been better served by grief than by hope. That question doesn't resolve. It just lives in you after you talk to both of them and realize what each of them is carrying. Story 4. Fastrid. She wants to leave Ivarstead so badly it feels like a physical ache in every line of her dialogue. She's young, she's in love, or thinks she is, with a boy named Bassianus. He lives in the village too. He also wants to leave. They could leave together, and they both know it, but neither of them is doing anything about it, and instead, Fastrid wanders around the town with this barely contained desperation, this sense of someone who has already left in every way that matters, except the literal one. Her parents want her to stay. They want her to marry a local hunter, Klimek. He's reliable. He's good. He climbs the 7,000 steps to deliver supplies to the Greybeards. He's been doing it for years, quietly and faithfully, and he is almost certainly a better long-term prospect for Fastrid than Bassianus. But Fastrid does not want reliable. She wants out. If you help her, she and Bassianus leave. If you help her parents, Klimek gets the girl, but she is not. The dialogue makes clear. Particularly excited about this. There's no villain here. There's just a young woman in a small town who is beginning to understand that the gap between the life you imagine and the life you end up with can be very wide and very cold. Story 5. Klimek. He climbs those steps every season. It takes most people the better part of a day to make the full ascent to High Hrothgar, in the cold, in the thin air, fighting off the ice wraiths that nest on the higher stretches of the path. Klimek does it with a pack full of supplies for the Greybeards. He does it alone. He has done it for years. Nobody gave him this job. He just started doing it and kept doing it. There's something very Nordic about that. This sense of obligation to a task that is difficult and thankless, and which nobody is making you do. The Greybeards barely acknowledge him. If they even know his name is unclear. He climbs the mountain, leaves the supplies, climbs back down, and Ivarstead absorbs him back into its unremarkable rhythms. He likes Fastrid. He might even love her, and she, with her eyes always on the road that leads away, barely sees him at all. Story 6. Bassianus Axius. There is a gentle tragedy in being the person someone else uses as their reason to escape. Bassianus wants to leave Ivarstead, yes, but when you actually talk to him, when you peel back the surface of his restlessness, you find someone who isn't quite sure what he wants to escape to. He wants out. He wants Fastrid. He wants something different, but the specific shape of that different life is not something he has worked out. In many ways, he and Fastrid are running toward the same vague horizon, each using the other as evidence that the horizon is real. Whether they'll find what they're looking for when they get to Riften is something the game doesn't tell us. Most people who leave small towns don't become the stories they imagined. They become different people in different small circumstances, still carrying the original hunger, but no longer able to name what they're hungry for. Story 7. Temba Widearm. She runs the mill at Iverstead. She is angry about bears. This seems funny until you actually stop and listen to her. She has been trying to run a lumber business on the edge of a forest full of bears that keep breaking her equipment and destroying her stockpiles, and generally making commerce impossible. She asks you to bring her 10 bear pelts because she is, at this point, in a full and committed state of war with the local bear population. What makes this quietly tragic, rather than just funny, is the persistence of it. She has not given up. She is not leaving. She is standing in her ruined little mill on the banks of a river, in a village at the end of the world, and she is still fighting. Against bears, yes, but still fighting. There is something in that stubbornness that is more moving than it should be. Story 8. Gwilyn. He's the wood elf who works at Temba's mill, and on paper, he has very little going on. He chops wood. He lives in Ivarstead. He doesn't have a dramatic backstory written into any of the game's notes or dialogue, but if you stop and talk to him, there's something quietly real in his presence. He's a long way from the forests of Valenwood. He ended up in one of the coldest corners of one of the coldest provinces in Tamriel, swinging an axe at logs in the service of an angry woman who is at war with bears. And he seems okay with it, not thrilled, not broken, just present, just working, just here. In a game full of people being destroyed by their circumstances, someone who has made an uneasy peace with theirs feels almost remarkable. Story 9. Boti. She's Fastred's mother, and she wants her daughter to stay more than she wants her daughter to be happy, and she knows it, and she has the grace to feel conflicted about it. That awareness doesn't stop her from wanting what she wants. She'll offer you money to steer Fastred toward Klimek. She'll frame it as being about what's good for Fastred, but underneath it you can hear the sound of a parent who is afraid of being left alone, and is dressing that fear in the language of maternal concern. The saddest thing about Boti is not that she's wrong. Klimek probably would make Fastred's life more stable. She is not wrong. She is just also very afraid. And the fear has gotten tangled up with the love, and now she can't quite tell where one ends and the other begins. Story 10. Linley Starsung. She is the bard at the Villamere Inn in Ivarstead. She plays and sings for the handful of pilgrims and locals who pass through. She's young, she's talented, she is also hiding. Her real name is Svidi. She is from the Reach. She came to Ivarstead to escape something, and she changed her name and started calling herself Linley and picked up a lute. And now she plays songs in a small inn at the edge of the world and hopes that whatever she ran from stays far away. What she ran from, specifically, is a man named Sibby Blackbriar, who is currently imprisoned in Riften. His family is looking for her. The Blackbriars are not the sort of family you want looking for you. She tells almost no one any of this. She plays her music. She smiles at the guests. She is building a life out of borrowed time, note by note, and every stranger who walks through the door of that inn is a moment of quiet terror before she realizes they're not who she was afraid they'd be. Wherever you're listening from tonight, drop it in the comments. Tell me the time, tell me the place, and if this is the kind of thing that helps you unwind, consider subscribing. There are a lot more nights like this one ahead. Part 2. The Shadows of Windhelm. Windhelm is the oldest city in Skyrim. Ysgramor built it. Thousands of years of Nordic history pressed down on every cold stone of it. The Palace of the Kings has been standing since before the concept of a unified empire existed. The harbor has heard the creaking of 1,000 ships. It is also one of the most miserable places in the game if you are not a Nord. The Dark Elves, who live in the Grey Quarter, have been there for 200 years, 2 centuries, multiple generations. People were born in those cramped, damp buildings, who had grandparents who were also born there, who had parents who fled Morrowind when Red Mountain erupted in the year 5 of the 4th era and turned a civilization into ash and memory. Windhelm was supposed to be temporary, and then the temporary became a decade, and then the decade became a century, and then the century became 2 of them. And the Grey Quarter stayed grey, and the Nords who walked past it kept walking past it. Story 11. Suvaris Atheron. She works at the docks. She keeps the books for Clan Shattershield's shipping operation, a position that pays her enough to survive in a city that does not want her to thrive. The Nords at the docks hate her, not for anything she has done, for what she is. She is Dunmer, and this city has decided, over the course of 200 years of slow institutional contempt, that being Dunmer is reason enough. She lives in the Grey Quarter. She walks to work every morning past people who look through her. She does her job better than most of the people around her. She goes home, she sleeps, she does it again. If Ulfric wins the Civil War, her situation does not improve. It does not improve, regardless of which side wins. The political questions that consume the Hold do not include the question of whether people like Suvaris deserve to be treated like people. There is a note you can find at the docks, a list of names written by an informant for the East Empire Company. Suvaris's name is on it. Someone she trusted gave that information to people who would use it against her. The betrayal of it is just one more weight in a life that is already very heavy. Story 12. Amberys Rendar. He runs the new Gnisis Corner Club in the Grey Quarter. He is one of the few Dunmer and Windhelm who has managed to carve out something resembling economic independence. The Corner Club is theirs. The Nords of the city don't come there. It's the one space in Windhelm where the Dark Elves can sit and speak their language, and be, for a little while, something other than the problem that nobody wants to deal with. If you're a Nord who walks in, Amberys will tell you, without particular hostility, but with absolute clarity, that you are not welcome. He has been generous enough with his warmth for 200 years. He's run out. He's not wrong. He's just tired. Story 13. Silda the Unseen. She is a beggar in Windhelm. She teaches pickpocketing if you pay her, which is its own kind of quiet comedy. The fact that her most marketable skill is one that depends entirely on other people not noticing her. She is unseen. The name says it. She has been invisible to this city for so long that she has, in some ways, made her peace with it, made a career out of it. If you speak with her long enough, fragments emerge. A life that went wrong at some point, some combination of choices and circumstances that landed her on these cold cobblestones with nothing. She asks for gold sometimes. Sometimes you give it. She thanks you, and the conversation ends, and she goes back to being unseen. Story 14. Viola Giordano. She is obsessed with the butcher. She plasters her warnings around Windhelm. She talks about it to anyone who will listen. The guards ignore her. The citizens find her irritating. She is that specific kind of person who is clearly right and somehow manages to present their rightness in a way that makes everyone around them want to look away. She has identified that something terrible is happening to the women of Windhelm, and she has decided that this is unacceptable, and she is going to make noise about it until someone does something. The city's response, largely, is to consider her a nuisance. The serial killer she keeps shouting about is real. She's right. She's been right the whole time. And the most painful thing about her story is not that she was ignored. It's that being right about something terrible doesn't feel like victory. It just feels like having been alone with the horror for longer than everyone else. Story 15. Susanna the Wicked. She worked at the Candlehearth Hall. She earned the nickname because she had a sharp sense of humor and a sharper tongue. And that's a thing they apparently call wicked in Windhelm, if you're a barmaid who doesn't pretend to find everything charming. She is the third victim. The quest that her death triggers, Blood on the Ice, begins when you find her body in the graveyard. The witnesses gathered around her are shocked, but the city's response, once the initial horror fades, is largely to manage its way back to normal. The guards have a war to deal with. The Hold Steward handles the official concern. The investigation doesn't happen unless you make it happen. Susanna had a life. She had a corner of a tavern where she carried drinks and made jokes, and had probably figured out exactly which regulars were worth talking to and which ones she could smile through without actually engaging. She knew the rhythms of that room. And then one night she left the building and didn't get far. She deserved more investigation than she got. Story 16. Tova Shatter Shield. She is the matriarch of one of Windhelm's most prominent families, and by the time you meet her, she is being destroyed by it. Her daughter Frigga was murdered by the butcher before the events of the game begin. The family's grief is still raw. You can see it in the way Tova carries herself, in the way her other daughter Nilsine moves through the world with this barely contained fragility. Yerim, their former house, has blood in the walls. Nobody talks about it. The city has tried to move on. Tova has not moved on. She can't. There is no moving on from a murdered child. If you join the Dark Brotherhood, you will eventually receive a contract with an optional provision. You can kill Nilsine Shattershield, Tova's surviving daughter, for a bonus payment. If you do this, Tova will find her. She will find both her daughters gone, one by a killer she barely survived knowing about, one by an assassin she will never understand. The game confirms what happens next. Tova takes her own life. She cannot survive the second one. There is a room in Windhelm with a note in it that describes this. And then there is a grave. The Shattershields are one of the wealthiest families in the city. Their wealth protected them from everything, except this. Story 17. Nilsine Shattershield. She is already grieving when you meet her. She is carrying the weight of her sister's death and the weight of her mother's grief and trying to be, somehow, enough for both of them. She hasn't been given time to grieve her own loss. She's been required to be the surviving one, the one who holds things together, the one who can still walk around and answer questions and maintain some semblance of functioning. There is a specific kind of loneliness in being the person who is still alive when someone else isn't. It comes with its own particular guilt, this feeling that you're taking up space your sister left behind, that your continued existence is somehow an argument the universe is making about which of you mattered more. She didn't ask for this. She just had the misfortune of surviving. Story 18. Calixto Corium. On the surface, he runs a museum, the House of Curiosities, in Windhelm's Stone Quarter. He gives tours. He's pleasant. He's interested in history, in artifacts, in old things. The kind of person who seems slightly odd but harmlessly so. The sort of man you might meet at a market stall selling things nobody needs and think, vaguely, that he probably has an interesting life. He and his sister Lucilla traveled the world together. Adventurers, collectors, two people who made their lives out of finding strange things in strange places and bringing them home. He has the museum as evidence of it, relics from every corner of Tamriel. And then Lucilla died. The journals don't say exactly when or exactly how. She came to Windhelm with him and she died, and that was the end of something that had been the center of his life. Without her, the traveling was just moving. Without her, the collecting was just accumulating. And then he started reading the wrong books. He started asking the wrong questions. He found his way to necromancy, specifically to the idea that what death takes, a sufficiently knowledgeable person might be able to take back. He needed things, specific things, the kind of things you can only get from certain people under specific circumstances. By the time you arrive in Windhelm, 3 women are already dead. He is attending their crime scenes as a helpful bystander. He is holding their amulets and naming them for you, incorrectly and deliberately. He is steering you toward an innocent man. He is moving through a city full of people who trusted him, and using that trust the way a weapon uses the hand that holds it. The thing that makes Calixto genuinely terrifying, rather than just monstrous, is that the grief that broke him is completely understandable. He loved his sister. He couldn't accept that she was gone. He couldn't accept that some things, once lost, stay lost. Most people who lose someone they love don't do what Calixto did. But most people's grief doesn't become a series of unsolved murders either. The gap between his grief and his response to it is the gap that contains everything horrible about him and everything pitiable, and the fact that both can be true at once. Story 19. Woundfirth the Unliving. He is the court mage of Windhelm. He has served under Ulfric for years. He is old, he is severe, he looks exactly like the kind of person a panicked investigation might decide is responsible for a series of murders. If you follow the investigation poorly, you'll arrest him. You'll bring him to the steward as a suspect, and he'll be thrown in jail, and you'll have done terrible damage to an innocent man's life, because the evidence was suggestive, and the pressure was real, and it was easy to look at someone who studies ancient magic and has a forbidding demeanor, and decide he was probably the one. He wasn't. He knows who was. From inside his cell. The murders continue, and he sits there knowing and being unable to stop it, unable to convince anyone to listen to him, a man imprisoned by the conclusion someone else jumped to while the actual danger walks free. Story 20. Brunwulf Free Winter. He speaks up. In a city where speaking up about the treatment of Dark Elves and Argonians is deeply unpopular, Brunwulf Free Winter does it anyway. He says, plainly, that the way Windhelm treats its non-Nord residents is wrong. He says it to guards. He says it to anyone who will listen. He is not naive about what this costs him socially. He served in the Imperial Army. He fought alongside people from every race. He watched people die together, and the categories that Windhelm insists on collapsed in the face of it. He came home from that and found his city, maintaining walls that war had shown him were meaningless. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Brunwulf becomes Jarl of Windhelm. He immediately begins improving conditions in the Grey Quarter. 2 centuries of suffering, and it takes one man who went to war and came back, willing to say that the way things were wasn't the way things had to be. Story 21. Angrenor once honored. He used to be a soldier. He was honored once, as the name says. And then the war ended, or his part in it did, and there was no more honor to be found, just the cold streets and the slow diminishment of everything he used to be. He begs in Windhelm now. He has a mean streak, specifically toward Dunmer. He expresses it in the way people who have lost something they valued often do, by finding someone lower on whatever hierarchy they've constructed and reminding them of their place. It doesn't make him sympathetic, but it does make him familiar. The specific shape of his cruelty is the shape of someone who has nothing left that makes him feel like he matters, except the accident of the race he was born into. That's not an excuse, it's an explanation. And explanations are not comfort. Story 22. Skald the Elder. He is the Jarl of Dawnstar, and he is not in Windhelm, but he belongs in this section because of what he represents. He is an old man who is certain, Stormcloak, proud, immovable. His certainty was useful once, when certainty was what the situation required. Now, the world has gotten more complicated, and he hasn't. He dismisses the nightmares tormenting his people, because addressing them would require him to take advice from a priest. And priests of Mara are soft things, he's decided. And soft things shouldn't be listened to by hard men. His people are suffering. He knows it, and he is choosing, every day, not to do what would help them, because doing it would require him to be wrong about something, and he is too old and too tired to be wrong. Part 3. The Dark Brotherhood's Condemned. There is a sanctuary in the forests of Falkreath, hidden behind a black door, that will not open unless you answer its question correctly. What is the music of life? The answer is silence. The door opens into a place where the candles are always burning low and the air smells like pine resin and old blood and something sweet underneath both of them. The people who live here are not monsters, or not entirely. They are, most of them, people who arrived at this place through a specific series of doors that closed behind them one by one until this was the only room left. Story 23. Aventus Aretino. His mother died in the winter. That sentence contains an entire story. It is 4 words, and it contains a child's whole world ending. His mother died in the winter, and there was no father, and the machinery of imperial welfare did what it does, which is find him a place to sleep and call the problem solved. The place it found was Honor Hall Orphanage in Riften, run by a woman named Grelod. Nobody in Riften's government was paying close attention to what happened inside Honor Hall. The orphans were housed. They were fed enough to not technically be starving. On paper, the obligation had been met. Aventus Aretino is 9 or 10 years old, maybe. He escaped from the orphanage. He walked from Riften to Windhelm. He broke into his mother's empty house, which had been sitting locked since her death. He gathered the things the ritual required. He made an effigy out of whatever materials he could find, and he began to perform the Black Sacrament. He did this for weeks. He didn't have a teacher. He had heard of the Dark Brotherhood, heard the ritual described in pieces, and he assembled what he understood of it, and did it alone, in the dark, night after night, praying to the Night Mother and asking her to please, please, send someone to help him. When you arrive and he sees you, the relief on his face is one of the most genuinely moving things in the game. He was not certain anyone would come. He had kept doing it anyway. He explains, when you ask, that Grelod the Kind beats the children. He says it plainly and without particular drama, the way children describe things they have accepted as normal, because they have no other reference point. The children are mistreated. Something needs to happen. He could not think of any other way to make something happen. A child taught himself a forbidden ritual and performed it alone in an empty house for weeks, because no adult was coming, and the official channels had already failed him. This is the context in which you kill Grelod the Kind. Story 24. Grelod the Kind. The name is the joke. She is not kind. She is a bitter old woman who appears to derive something from having complete power over people who cannot resist her. The children are forbidden to speak of being adopted. She dashes their hope of families regularly and deliberately. When you enter the orphanage, she is in the middle of a speech to the assembled children about how no one will ever want them. She has been doing this for a long time. There's a specific cruelty in the comfortable. Grelod has food. Grelod has warmth. Grelod has authority. What she does with all of that is use it to make sure the children in her care feel as small as possible every single day. When you kill her, the children applaud. That detail is the one that lands the hardest. The children cheer. These children, who have been taught that expressing happiness or hope is something to be crushed out of them, who have been ground down by this woman's presence for long enough to have accepted that this was just what life was, they see her fall and they cheer. You don't feel like a murderer in that moment. You feel like something was corrected. Story 25. Babette. She looks like a child of about 10. She has been 10 for 300 years. A vampire bit her when she was a child. This is not something she chose. This happened to her. The turning preserved her at that age, stopped whatever clock was running, and left her frozen there. A 10-year-old girl who has been alive longer than anyone she will ever meet. She is smart. She is cheerful in the specific way of someone who has metabolized their circumstances through sheer duration. She has had 3 centuries to get used to being what she is, and she is, in her own way, perfectly adapted to it. The way she describes her contracts is the part that is difficult to sit with. She plays the lost child. She approaches men who should know better, who don't, because all they can see is a small girl who seems to be in distress. She cries. She says the Dark Brotherhood killed her mama and papa. She is taken in. And then the thing that they don't see coming happens. She has been doing this for 300 years. She will still be doing it in another 300. The world will change around her, and she will stay exactly where she is, perpetually 10, perpetually capable, perpetually unseen as what she actually is. There is something almost philosophical about that. The advantages of being underestimated, made permanent. The loneliness of it, also permanent. Story 26. Cicero. His journals. If you take the time to find them, to sit with them in whatever corner of the sanctuary you've claimed, they will take you apart. He was a jester. He had a last contract, a man who hired him to kill someone, and he did it with all the craft he'd spent a lifetime developing. He played the fool, he distracted, he made the kill, and then the Brotherhood started to fall apart. Members abandoned the organization, or died, or both. One by one, the people who had made the sanctuary in Cyrodiil a place to come home to stopped coming home. Cicero was the last one. He in the Night Mother's coffin and nothing else. He talks to her. He keeps talking to her. The journals trace the arc of this very carefully, the way a person's voice changes when they have been completely alone for long enough. The humor darkens. The sentences get stranger. He starts to understand silence in ways he didn't before. He transported the Night Mother to Skyrim. He drove the cart himself through territory that was dangerous and cold and utterly indifferent to what he was carrying and why. He maintained the cart. He maintained her. He maintained the old rituals even when there was no one left to perform them for. When he arrives at the Falkreath Sanctuary, he is broken in specific ways. The madness is not random. It is the shape of what happens to a person who is entirely devoted to something that cannot respond to them, who keeps going because stopping would mean admitting that the thing they devoted themselves to was gone. Cicero is the last of the old Dark Brotherhood, and he is, underneath the bells and the knife, desperately, achingly faithful. Story 27. Astrid. She built the Falkreath Sanctuary from almost nothing. After the Brotherhood's collapse, after the various catastrophes that reduced a continent-spanning organization to scattered survivors, Astrid took what remained and made something out of it. She recruited. She organized. She structured a life around this place and these people and the particular code that holds them together. She is a capable woman. She is a loving one, in her way, to the people in her sanctuary. She has a husband she married for love. She has a family she constructed out of people who had nowhere else to go. Her betrayal of the Brotherhood, when it comes, is not simple villainy. It comes from fear. The Night Mother is communicating again, which means the old hierarchy is being restored, which means Astrid is no longer in charge of the thing she built. She made something from ruins. She led people through years of difficulty. And now she is being told that her authority was never legitimate, that the old structures supersede what she created. She makes the choice she makes. She sells her people to the Empire to try to preserve her position. The burns she sustains when the sanctuary is destroyed are what finally brings her to the truth of what she's done. She is lying in the fire, and she is asking you to use her own knife on her, and there is nothing left of the woman who built something, except the recognition that she unmade it. She was not a good person. She was a complex person. And there is a particular sadness in people who have genuine capacity for love and loyalty and then burn it all down the moment something threatens their control. Story 28. Astrid's husband, Arnbjorn. He is a werewolf who loves his wife completely. That's basically his entire story. He found someone in the most unlikely place who he would do anything for. The rage that drives him in combat, the animal that lives underneath the surface, is set aside entirely when he's with her. When she is killed, something in him goes out. He survives the events of the questline, but there is nothing to survive for anymore. Not really. The thing he had organized his life around is gone. He was not a good man either. He was a man who found something worth being better for, and then lost it. Story 29. Nazir. He is the practical one, the administrator, the man who hands out the small contracts while the larger drama unfolds. You don't learn much about Nazir's history directly, but his practicality has the specific quality of someone who has been around long enough to understand that organizations collapse and wars are lost, and the only sensible response is to do the job well and not attach too much to outcomes. He survives the Sanctuary massacre because he wasn't there. He escapes because he is careful and because he has learned, over the course of a very long career, that sentiment is a liability. He mourns Babette's absence during the attack, in a line of dialogue that is small and easy to miss and quietly devastating. He says only that he's glad she wasn't there. That's it. That's the whole thing. A man who has seen too much to be surprised by loss, still relieved that this particular loss didn't happen. Story 30. Vizara. He is the last of the Shadow Scales, an ancient Argonian tradition in which hatchlings born under the Shadowstone were given to the Brotherhood as children, raised as assassins, bound to the organization from the moment they could walk. He is the last one. All the others are dead. The tradition ended because the Brotherhood collapsed in regions where it had thrived, and Vizara is the only Shadow Scale still living, which means he is not just a member of a guild. He is the last surviving representative of a cultural and religious tradition that stretched back generations. He doesn't talk about this often. It's there if you know to look for it, in the specific gravity of his presence, in the way he accepts everything that happens with a steadiness that goes beyond training. He was given to the Brotherhood as a child. He had no say in it. He grew up in it. It became him. And now it is him, and he is it. And there is nothing left of the tradition except this one Argonian who keeps carrying it. Story 31. Gabriella. She is cultured, she reads. She has opinions about art and history, and she keeps a relatively clean corner of a sanctuary where assassins sharpen knives and a vampire child brews poisons. There is something in that very specifically. The person who insists on maintaining refinement inside circumstances that would seem to make refinement absurd, who keeps books on a shelf in a murder den and refers to contracts with a kind of aesthetic appreciation. Her contract, when it comes to you, involves a scholar. She speaks of it with something that might be respect. She is not unaware of the contradiction. Story 32. Festus Crex. Old, irritable, and deeply competent. He has been doing this since before most of the sanctuary's current members were born. He has run out of patience for incompetence. He has also, somewhere underneath the performance of his contempt, run out of places to be other than here. He's not going to find another life at this point. The Brotherhood is it. He knows it. And so he stays, and he complains, and he does the work, and he is, despite the presentation, exactly the kind of person you want in your corner. Story 33. Liss. She is Gabriella's pet spider. She has no dialogue. She is not sentient in any way the game acknowledges. But if you kill her, the other Dark Brotherhood members will come after you. There is something in that. These are professional killers who spend their days planning murders. They will let an enormous amount go without comment. They will accept and carry out contracts on the full range of human beings without particular moral concern. Kill the spider, and they get genuinely upset. The things that cut through, even in the most hardened people, even in a den of assassins, something small and helpless has been loved. And if you take it away from them, they will show you exactly what they're capable of. Story 34. Shadowmere. The horse. She has been with the Brotherhood longer than most of its members. She can't be permanently killed. She appears out of dark pools of water when she's needed. She has been ridden on the most terrible errands in Tamriel's history and returned every time. There is loyalty in that, if a horse can be said to be loyal. Or maybe something stranger, something that has more to do with Sithis than with affection. A horse that belongs to death, that keeps coming back, because death always does. She is, in her way, the most faithful member of the organization. Part 4. The Thieves' Guild's Broken Hearts. Under Riften, below the marketplace and the canal and the damp smell of everything, there is the Ratway. And through the Ratway, there is the Ragged Flagon. And at the back of the Ragged Flagon, there is a cistern where people who steal things for a living eat their meals and argue about money and try to remember what it felt like when things were going well. Things have not been going well for a while. Story 35. Gallus Desidenius. He is already dead when you arrive. He was the guild master before Mercer Frey. A man of culture, according to everyone who knew him. Not just a thief, but a scholar. Someone who treated the business of stealing as an art form that deserved to be practiced with intelligence and care. He discovered what Mercer was doing. The skeleton key, the Twilight Sepulchre, the slow theft from the organization that Gallus had built his life inside. He gathered the evidence. He was going to do something about it. Mercer killed him in a graveyard. He framed Carlia for the murder. Carlia, who had been Gallus's partner, Gallus's lover, by some accounts, the person he trusted most. Gallus spent the years after his death in a kind of liminal state, his journal preserved in the place where he was killed, the truth locked inside it, in a language almost no one could read. He could not be vindicated. He could not rest. He could only wait. It takes decades for someone to finally find the journal and decipher it, and bring him what he had been waiting for. His ghost is there when Carlia finally completes the ritual to restore the Twilight Sepulchre. He thanks her. He tells her it was not her fault. He disappears. He waited decades to tell the person he loved that he didn't blame her for surviving. Story 36. Carlia. 25 years. She has been alone for 25 years, hiding, moving, never staying in one place long enough to be found by the man who murdered her partner and blamed her for it. She has spent every one of those years trying to find a way to prove the truth. She has not been able to do it alone. The Thieves' Guild thinks she killed Gallus. The Guildmaster, the murderer himself, has successfully maintained that narrative for a quarter-century. She doesn't run. She doesn't give up. She stays, just out of reach, gathering pieces of a case that requires a very specific set of circumstances to prove. She needs the journal. She needs someone who can read the language it's written in. She needs an opportunity that hasn't come. And then you arrive, and the opportunity comes. She is cautious when you meet her. She has learned to be. She has been wrong about trusting people before. Or at least the world has found ways to make it look like she was. She gives you enough to work with, waits to see what you do with it, and only begins to believe you might actually be useful when you've earned it. The scene in Erkenthand, where she finally faces Mercer, is not triumphant in the way you might expect. There is no satisfaction in his death, exactly. There is just the end of something that took 25 years to end. She never got those years back. Gallus never got to know she was innocent before he died. The guild spent decades under the leadership of the man who killed its heart. None of that gets undone. She wins. And the winning is just the absence of the losing. Nothing more. Story 37. Mercer Frey. He was the best student the guild ever had. Gallus saw it in him and cultivated it. He made Mercer his second. He admitted him to the Nightingales. He gave him everything he had to give. Mercer took all of it. He took the knowledge and the position and the sacred trust and the skeleton key, and he turned every gift into a tool for accumulating more and more for himself alone. There is a specific kind of corruption that requires gratitude to betray. You have to accept the thing that's given to you. You have to let someone trust you. and then you have to take that trust and use it precisely where it's most vulnerable. Mercer is not simply a man who wanted money. He wanted to be untouchable. He wanted to have taken something from an organization that represented exactly the kind of collective that his nature found intolerable. He wanted the skeleton key not just for what it could open, but for what having it said about his relationship to everything. He framed Carlia because she was the only person who might have believed Gallus's doubts. He destroyed the guild's luck because it was the guild's, not his. He dies in a flooded chamber, in a dwarven ruin, surrounded by the evidence of a wealth he took rather than earned. His last words are something between defiance and confusion. A man who has operated for so long in a world he controlled that he genuinely cannot process the moment it ends. Story 38. Brynjolf. He believed in the guild. He really did. The schemes he runs in Riften's marketplace, the way he talks about the organization, have the quality of genuine affection for something he values. He's not just doing this for the money. He likes the life. He likes the people. He is, underneath the presentation, a true believer. And then Mercer happened, and the luck dried up, and the reputation crumbled, and the people he loved started dying or leaving or going somewhere they couldn't be reached. He keeps going. He keeps going because the alternative is admitting that the thing he organized his identity around was rotten at its center, and he cannot do that. There is a scene after the main Thieves Guild questline concludes where you expect Brynjolf to be there for you. He's not. He's at the bar. He's thinking. He says something about how he needs a moment. He's been holding it together for so long. The guild is restored now. Everything that needed to be fixed is fixed. And in the space where the urgency used to be, there's just a man who is exhausted and grieving and hasn't had time to do either one properly. Story 39. Vex. She is the best pickpocket in the guild, and she knows it, and she does not have the patience to pretend otherwise. She and Brynjolf are an interesting pair, the two most capable people in the organization, both carrying the weight of what it's become, expressing it in completely opposite directions. Brynjolf turns his grief into charm and relentless forward momentum. Vex turns hers into a sharp edge. She points at everything that disappoints her. She does not disappoint easily because she does not expect much. If you dig into her history, there are hints of a past that required her to build those walls very deliberately. She doesn't discuss it. She has decided that not discussing it is the appropriate response, and she is not wrong. Story 40. Delvin Mallory. He has a history with Astrid. It's mentioned in passing, a few lines of dialogue if you know where to look. He worked for the Dark Brotherhood briefly, years ago, after a job went wrong, and Gallus sent him there to let things cool down. He and Astrid had something. He doesn't talk about it much. He operates as the guild's inside contact for various services, the man who knows everyone and has accounts with everyone and can get things done in places where the guild's official reach doesn't extend. He is, in the language of his profession, deeply connected. What he is underneath all of that is a man who has spent a long career maintaining relationships that require him to be loyal to everyone and fully committed to no one. He's good at it. It has cost him things. Story 41. Tonelia. She handles the guild's fencing operations. She is competent and fair, and not particularly interesting to most players, which means most players don't know that she is, in the background of the guild's operations, one of the people holding the whole thing together, the unglamorous work. The work that doesn't involve dramatic confrontations in dwarven ruins or facing down former masters in flooded chambers. Just the daily management of stolen goods and careful relationships and the slow, patient building of something functional. Nobody tells stories about the people who do that work. Story 42. Isabel Rolane. She is in Hobbs Fall Cave. She has been there a while. The journey she took to get there began in Winterhold, at the Frozen Hearth Inn, where she lived with Ranmir, a man she loved and who loved her. They were poor. The cold city and the diminished economy of a place that had lost most of itself to the sea some years ago left them with very few options. She went to Vex. She had known Vex from before, from some earlier chapter of her life that the game doesn't elaborate on. Vex told her about a potentially lucrative job, a cave full of necromancers, which meant a cave full of things that could be taken. She went alone. She shouldn't have gone alone. She drank for courage before attempting the theft, which is maybe the detail that stays with you longest, the empty bottles near her body that tell the story of someone who needed to be less scared than they were. She was found, or the cold found her, or the drink caught up with her, before she could do what she came to do. She didn't make it out. Ranmir is still at the inn. He has been drinking since she left. He doesn't know what happened. He just knows she's gone, and his whole theory of himself was organized around her presence, and now he's sitting in the frozen hearth because he can't think of anywhere else to be. Story 43. Ranmir. The innkeeper says he used to be happy. That's the thing about Ranmir. He used to be happy. He wasn't always this person at the end of the bar. There was a version of him before Isabel left that the people who knew him remember with something like genuine fondness. He is now a man who has converted his grief into alcohol and his alcohol into distance. He is technically still present in the physical space of the inn. He is not reachable. If you find Isabel's body and bring him the letter she wrote, the letter that explains why she left and says she was doing it for them, for the money trouble, for the future she was trying to secure, the letter she never got to send, the grief changes shape. He's been angry this whole time. He thought she abandoned him. He thought she left without a word and didn't care enough to explain. The letter doesn't bring her back, but it removes the cruelty from the loss. And there is a specific and terrible kind of relief in that, in finding out that the person you lost didn't stop loving you, they just stopped breathing. Story 44. Sapphire. She works for the guild. She is Glover Mallory's daughter, though she doesn't know it for most of the game, and he doesn't know she survived. Her past is something she has sealed away so completely that she goes by a name that isn't hers and tells almost no one anything real about herself. Something happened to her. Something the game will give you fragments of if you find the right notes and speak to the right people, but never the whole thing, because the whole thing is hers and she has decided not to share it. She is good at her work. She is composed. She has built herself back up from something that tried to take her apart, and she is not going to let anyone look at the seams if she can help it. Story 45. Brandshay. He is a merchant in Riften's market. He sells things from a stall. He is dark elf. He is pleasant. He has a mystery in his past that he thinks about sometimes, the question of who his parents were and where he came from. He knows he was adopted. He knows nothing else. The guild, in the course of an early training mission, frames him for theft. He goes to jail for something he didn't do, locked up because you needed practice picking a pocket, and Brynjolf needed a mark. He serves the time. He gets out. He goes back to his stall. He never finds out who set him up. He never learns that the person the guild was training threw him under a cart as a practice exercise. He just experiences this unexplained event that disrupts his life and then moves on. Story 46. Maven Blackbriar. She is not a victim. She is the opposite of a victim. But her story belongs here because she represents the end point of a particular kind of ambition. The place you end up if you spend enough decades doing exactly what needs to be done to acquire and maintain power, without letting anything as inconvenient as ethics slow you down. She controls Riften. She controls the Thieves Guild. She has connections to the Dark Brotherhood. She has leverage on everyone who matters in the hold. She runs a meadery that employs half the city. She has raised children who are, in various ways, exactly as terrible as she is. If the Imperials win, she becomes Jarl. The official title simply makes visible what was always true. She's been ruling Riften for years. The governance structure just caught up. What's bleak about Maven is not the corruption, it's the competence. She is genuinely excellent at what she does. She is the smartest person in most rooms she enters. All of that intelligence and capability directed entirely toward the accumulation of power and the elimination of anyone who might threaten it. She doesn't have friends. She has leverage. The distinction matters to everyone around her. Part 5. Soldiers, Kings, and Lost Causes. The Civil War in Skyrim is a conflict with no good ending. Both sides know this, at some level, in the moments when they stop performing their certainty long enough to think. It grinds on, because the alternative, stopping, would require everyone involved to admit that the thing they sacrificed so much for might not have been worth the price. Story 47. High King Torrig. He is dead before the game begins. You meet him in Sovngarde, which means you meet him after Alduin's mists have gotten to him, lost in the cloud of souls that feeds the World Eater, wandering. He was young when he became High King. He admired Ulfric's Stormcloak. He read his speeches. He He thought about what Ulfric was saying and found himself moved by it. He was a Talos worshipper. He understood the argument for independence, and he would have granted it. Sybil Stentor, the court wizard in Solitude, tells you this if you ask. Torrig would have sided with the Stormcloaks if Ulfric had simply asked him. The whole war, every death that followed, every city burned and family destroyed, might have been avoided by a conversation. Ulfric didn't ask. He challenged the king to a duel in the old Nord fashion, and Torrig accepted, because a king cannot refuse a formal challenge without dishonoring himself. And then Ulfric used the voice, the unrelenting force shout, to knock him to the ground, and finished him with a sword while he was helpless. The duel was legal. Whether it was honorable is a question that different characters in the game answered differently, and that the game itself leaves open. In Sovngarde, Torrig does not speak of this with bitterness, so much as grief. He had a wife. He had a kingdom he was just beginning to understand. He had, by all accounts, the potential to be a genuinely good king. He was learning. He didn't get to finish learning. Story 48. Elisif the Fair. She is 25 or 26 years old. She is the Jarl of Hafingar. She is the widow of the High King of Skyrim. She was married at an age when most people are still figuring out what their own lives mean. Elevated to a political position that requires wisdom developed over decades. And then her husband was killed in front of her, and the empire she was supposed to represent started losing a war that his death caused. She does not hold it together perfectly. There are moments in her court where you can see the weight of it. The performance of queenliness is something she has learned, but the grief underneath it hasn't gone anywhere. There is a small quest she gives you. She asks you to take a horn that belonged to Torrig to the shrine of Talos. The request has nothing to do with governance or politics. She just wants someone to do this one thing, this private thing, that she believes he would have wanted. She is still loving him. In the middle of a war, in the middle of an impossible position, she is still doing small acts of love for someone who is gone. Story 49. Ulfric Stormcloak. He is more than he allows people to see. The public face is the warrior king, the man who fought in the Great War and watched his brothers die for terms of peace that he considered a betrayal, who came home and found a province that was told it could no longer worship its greatest hero, a man who had ascended to godhood, a Nord who had become divine. He took that prohibition personally. He was supposed to. What the documents in the Thalmor embassy reveal is that during the Great War, Ulfric was captured. He was interrogated. Under circumstances the game doesn't elaborate on, information was extracted from him that aided the enemy. He didn't know, at the time, the full significance of what he was giving them. He may not have been fully aware of what he was doing. The Thalmor classified him as an unwitting asset. His rebellion, the war he started, the deaths it caused, all of it serves Thalmor interests by weakening both the Empire and Skyrim simultaneously. Ulfric fights sincerely. His grief over what happened in the Great War is genuine. His love of his people is genuine. And all of it has been cultivated and channeled and directed by people who want exactly the conflict he's providing. If you kill him during the Civil War questline and then reach Sovngarde, you find him in the mists. He is horrified. He is watching soldiers from both sides being devoured, Imperial and Stormcloak alike, and he has had what may be the most difficult kind of revelation, that his rebellion, which he fought with everything he had, has been making Alduin stronger. The dead he sent to Sovngarde are being eaten. His war was feeding something worse than either side he was fighting. He says in the mists that he fights so that all the fighting he's done hasn't been for nothing. He sounds like a man who is beginning to understand that it might have been. Story 50. Galmar Stonefist. He is Ulfric's second, his oldest friend, the person who knew Ulfric when Ulfric was just a young man learning to fight and not yet a cause. He has followed Ulfric through everything. He does not have Ulfric's complexity, his internal contradictions, his capacity for doubt. Galmar is a hammer, and he has spent his life being exactly that, reliably and without questioning whether there might be circumstances in which being a hammer isn't what's needed. He is loyal in the absolute way, not the way that allows for criticism. The way that requires that everything Ulfric does is right, because if it isn't, then everything Galmar has done in service to it is also wrong, and that cannot be. He will die at Ulfric's side if you take the Imperial questline. He doesn't surrender. He stands there and faces you, and when he falls, it is without argument, without plea, without any indication that he has anything to say that hasn't already been said. There is something very specific about a man who has lived his whole life in total certainty about who he is and what he's for, and dies exactly as he lived. Story 51. Legate Ricka. She is Nord. She serves the Empire. Both of those things are completely true. The tension in Ricky is the tension of someone who has spent years being required to justify her existence to two different camps that each believe the other is the enemy. The Stormcloaks see her as a traitor to her people. The Imperials see her as a valuable officer, but also, in some corridors, as an outsider whose loyalty might shift. She grew up worshipping Talos. She keeps that. She does not perform it, because the Empire cannot permit it, and she serves the Empire, but she does not stop. It is the thing she holds on to. She understands what Ulfric is fighting for. She disagrees with how he's fighting for it. She believes, as her Commander General Tullius often doesn't, that the Empire is the best hope for Skyrim surviving what's coming with the Dominion. Not because the Empire is good, because the alternative is worse. If the Stormcloaks win, she faces Ulfric at the end. He offers her a chance to yield. She refuses. She will not yield to him, because yielding would mean she was wrong, and she was not wrong, and she knows it. She dies for that. Story 52. General Tullius. He does not understand Skyrim, and he knows it, and he finds this personally irritating. He is a capable military commander. He is a rational man in an environment that runs entirely on things that are not rational, on religion and honor, and the specific grudges of specific families going back generations. He keeps trying to apply logic to situations that are organized around other principles entirely. He respects Rikke. He doesn't say it often because he doesn't say things he doesn't need to say, but he listens to her when she says things that don't fit his framework, and that is, from a general, a significant thing. If you take the Imperial quest line, he stands over Ulfric at the end and offers him the death he deserves, which is not a dignified one. Rikke stops him. She gives Ulfric a soldier's death. Tullius watches. He doesn't argue. He doesn't understand it, but he understands that there are things he doesn't understand, and he is wise enough to let Rikke be right about this one. Story 53. Lokir of Rorikstead. He is in the cart at the beginning. He runs when they reach the block. He was a horse thief. That's all. He was caught crossing the border at the wrong time and swept up with the Stormcloaks because the Empire's border patrol was arresting everyone in the area and sorting it out later. He wasn't a rebel. He wasn't a soldier. He was just unlucky. He runs because running is the only rational thing you can do when you're about to be executed for something you didn't do. The guard shoots him. Before the game has given you a reason to care about anything, it has given you Lokir, a man who did not belong in that cart, who died because he was in the wrong place and tried the only reasonable thing he could think of. His name is Lokir. He was from Rorikstead. That's everything the game tells you about him. Story 54. Hadvar. He wants to believe the Empire is good. He's a soldier. He grew up in Riverwood under the shadow of the Empire's presence, with Gerder's family on the other side, the Stormcloak sympathizers. And he chose his side, and he has been, ever since, the kind of soldier who needs to believe that the side he chose was the right one. He is genuinely kind to you in Helgen, in the chaos of the dragon attack, guiding you out and making snap decisions about who to save. He doesn't abandon you when he could. He risks himself because you are there and in danger, and that seems to him like the relevant fact. He will come to your aid if you reach Riverwood after Helgen. He will ask you to deliver a message to his uncle, the blacksmith. These small domesticities, the uncle, the village, the message, are what the war is suspended over. The things people fight to protect and the things they fight to preserve. Whether the side he chose deserves that devotion is a question the game leaves with you. Story 55. Ralof. He believes. He believes in Ulfric, in Skyrim's independence, in the old ways and the right to worship Talos, and the idea that a land belongs to its people, not to an empire that lost its way. He believes this with the uncomplicated intensity of someone who hasn't been required to test his belief against reality for very long. Helgen is the testing ground, and Ralof passes it, comes through it, emerges from the smoke and the dragonfire still believing. He goes back to his war, He will win if you help him. And the victory will reveal what every victory in a complicated war reveals, which is that winning and being right are not the same thing. And the morning after the victory is when the real difficulty begins. Story 56. Commander Morrow. His son was killed by the Dark Brotherhood. The contract on the Emperor was facilitated through a chain of events that the Brotherhood organized, and at the end of that chain was Commander Morrow's son, a member of the Penitus Oculatus, dead. He comes for them. He works with Astrid, who betrayed them, and he destroys the sanctuary, and he believes, when it's done, that he has protected his master. He hasn't. The Emperor still dies. But Commander Morrow doesn't know that in the moment when he burns the sanctuary. In that moment, he is just a father who has done the thing that felt like it mattered. His grief and his work are tangled together in a way that makes both of them terrible. Part 6. The Companions and the Cursed. Jorvisker is a building made from the upturned hull of the boat that brought Ysgramor and his 500 warriors to Tamriel. It was dragged inland and built around. Everything since has been built around that original act of commitment. We came here, we fought here, and we are staying. The companions who live in it now are not those 500. They are their distant heirs, maintaining a tradition whose full history has mostly been lost to the millennia between Ysgramor's arrival and the Fourth Era. They still have the oaths. They still have the hierarchy, the harbinger, the circle, the initiates. They still have the codes. They also have a secret that is eating some of them alive. Story 57. Codlac Whitemane. He lost his family when he was a boy. The game mentions this almost in passing. He was young. They were gone. Askar, the harbinger before him, found him working as a bodyguard in Hammerfell and brought him in. The companions became his family. He poured everything into them, the love and the loyalty that had nowhere else to go. He became harbinger. He commanded. He was, by all accounts, exactly what a harbinger should be, fierce and fair and deeply certain about what the organization was supposed to stand for. And then he received the beast blood. It was a choice he made earlier in his life, like all the Circle made, because Lycan power is significant, and the companions have long had an ambivalent relationship with power and purity. He took it. He used it. He was strong. And then he got old, and he started thinking about what comes after, and the reality of the werewolf's fate became impossible to ignore. A werewolf's soul goes to Hirsine's hunting grounds on death. It does not go to Sovngarde. It does not find the Hall of Valor, the feasting and the songs, and the companionship of the honored dead. It goes somewhere else, to hunt forever for a Daedric prince who regards his quarry as sport. Codlac does not want that. He wants Sovngarde. He wants to join the companions who came before him, the ones who fought and died with honor and went to the place that honor earns. He wants to be with his family, whatever that means for someone whose family was taken from him so young. He spends the last years of his life researching a cure. He writes about it in his private journal. He is not despairing, exactly, but there is an urgency in him, a sense of time running out. He is killed before the cure is found. The Silverhand attacks Whiterun, and Codlac, who was old but not diminished, fights them. He is overwhelmed. He dies in his living quarters, on the floor, in the house he organized his whole life inside of. When you finally reach his spirit in Wisegrammer's tomb, he is there, and you can do what he spent his last years hoping for. You can give him the cure in the only place that still matters, in the realm of the spirit, in the moment before his soul's destination is decided. He thanks you. He walks into the light. The relief of it, after everything, is quiet and real, and nothing like a triumph. Story 58. Skjor. He was one of the most experienced warriors in the Circle. He was also reckless in the specific way of someone who has been fighting for long enough that they've gotten comfortable with the idea of not coming back. He leads you into an ambush at Gallows Rock, chasing the Silverhand without adequate preparation, and he is killed there. Ayla finds him. Ayla, who loved him, though neither of them used that language, because that is not the language of people who live the way they lived. His death is the catalyst for Ayla's grief-driven campaign against the Silverhand. She doesn't call it grief. She calls it vengeance. She hunts them systematically and thoroughly, and she does not stop. But underneath the vengeance is the grief. It's always the grief. Story 59. Ayla the Huntress. She is proud of what she is. The beast blood is not a curse to Ayla. It is the truest part of herself, the thing that makes her capable of what she does and what she is. She will not seek the cure. She has heard Kodlak's arguments, and she respects them, and she will not change her mind. This puts her in an interesting position in the quest line. She is not wrong, from inside her own value system. The companions were given the blood by Hircine for a reason. It has served them. It serves her. The idea that it requires redemption, that she needs to be made into something purer and more conventional, is not something she accepts. She and Kodlak love each other, in the way that people who disagree about something fundamental can love each other, deeply and without the expectation of conversion. After Skjor, she is quieter, not broken, because Ayla does not break, but quieter. The hunt is her way of processing things, the running and the killing and the focus required to track something through wilderness. When she has something to track, she doesn't have to sit with what she's lost. Story 60. Vilkas. He and his brother Farkas were taken in by the companions as children. He grew up to be the more intellectual of the two. He reads. He thinks. He has opinions about what honor means and how it should be practiced, and he is capable of being genuinely insufferable about those opinions, which is partly because he is right, and partly because being right does not require being insufferable about it. But he has not learned this yet. He struggles with the beast blood in a different way than Kodlak. It is not Sovngarde he thinks about. It is control. He is a man who values the ability to direct his own actions, and the beast is not always directed. There are moments when it goes somewhere he didn't choose to send it. The guilt of those moments is something he doesn't discuss. It shows up in how seriously he takes the codes, how rigid his application of them can be. The rules are the thing that stands between him and the thing he doesn't want to be. Story 61. Farkas. He is the gentler of the twins, more physically imposing, somehow less threatening. He has the quality of large dogs that are completely unaware of how large they are. He is not complicated. He is good and loyal, and he loves the companions and his brother and the life he has built inside Jorvaskr. He does not require more than this. He has found a place where he belongs, and that place is enough. When Kodlak is killed, Farkas is devastated in a way that he doesn't have the vocabulary for. He is not a man who processes things in words. He processes them in action, in training, in the physical work of being a warrior. He keeps going. He keeps training. He keeps being the person the companions need him to be. There is a kind of strength in simplicity, in people who do not dramatize their pain but simply absorb it and continue. Farkas is that kind of person. It is not the absence of depth. It is depth expressed differently. Story 62. Rhea. She is the newest member when you join. She is enthusiastic. She is earnest. She wants to be here, wants to belong, wants to prove herself to the people around her who have all been at this longer than she has. She is, for most of the questline, someone you walk past on your way to more significant things. She trains. She's there when you come back from missions. She expresses admiration. She is, in the structure of the story, background. But she is also someone who left wherever she came from, took whatever she knew about herself, and showed up at Whiterun's gates and said she wanted to be a companion. The audacity of that, quietly. The willingness to show up somewhere that matters and ask to be let in. Story 63. Nada Stonearm. She does not like you when you arrive. She does not like most people when they arrive. She has been here long enough to have formed her opinions about what this place is and who deserves to be in it, and she holds those opinions with the conviction of someone who has invested heavily in not needing anyone's approval. She is one of the best fighters in the companions, and she knows it, and she keeps herself a little separated from the warmth of the place, a little armored against the familiarity. If you get past that armor, there's someone who is trying very hard not to need people, and finding it more difficult than she'd like. Story 64. Aethys. He is Dunmer, a member of a guild that is deeply, historically connected to Nordic identity. He is a stranger to all of it, in ways that nobody acknowledges. The companions accepted him. The oaths don't distinguish by race. The warrior tradition is broader than the Nordic one, in theory. In practice, Aethys navigates a space where most of the songs and stories and rituals are organized around a culture that is not his. He makes it work. He's capable. He fits. But fitting is different from belonging, and the difference costs something, quietly, over time. Part 7. Wanderers, Outcasts, and the Forgotten. There are places in Skyrim that don't appear on any major itinerary. No quest will send you there. No main story thread needs them. They are just places where things happened, and the things that happened left evidence. And if you find that evidence and put it together, the world opens up in ways that the design narrative doesn't require. Story 65. The Frostflow Lighthouse Family. A Redguard family bought a lighthouse. His name was Habd. Her name was Ramadi. Their children were Sudi and Mani, and they had not wanted to come. The journals make this clear. This was Habd and Ramadi's dream. The lighthouse, the sea view, the independence of running their own light at the edge of the world. The children were less convinced. They came from Hammerfell. They had saved. This was supposed to be the thing they had been working toward. When you arrive at Frostflow Lighthouse, the first thing you see is a dead horse on the path outside. Inside, you find Ramadi's body in the main room. There is blood. There is evidence of panic. The journals are scattered around in the way that things scatter when there is not time to arrange them carefully. What happened is a Falmer infestation. There is an opening in the cellar that connects to the caves below, and the Falmer came up through it. Habd followed them down to try to find his children. Mani went further in. Sudi was taken. You descend through the Frostflow abyss, and you find them. The children are dead. Habd is dead further in, near a Chaurus Reaper that he apparently managed to kill before he was overwhelmed. He left a note. It says to burn his remains in the lighthouse beacon, so that he can spend eternity keeping a light for travelers at sea. He was still being a lighthouse keeper in the last lines he ever wrote. You can fulfill this request. You carry his ashes up to the lamp room and place them in the brazier, and the light goes on. The Sailor's Repose ability activates, a permanent buff to healing spells, named for the comfort of seeing a harbor light when you're lost at sea. The reward for this quest line is a permanent blessing from a man who died, trying to protect his children, and wanted, in death, to keep doing something useful. It will not leave you easily. Story 66. Habd. He went into the cave. He did not have to. He could have run. He could have escaped with Ramadi, could have gotten out while the Falmer were still occupied. He chose to go down instead, into the dark, following the sounds his children made as they were taken. He went because he was their father, and this is what fathers do, or what they should do, and he was not going to be the kind of man who didn't. He killed the Reaper. He died doing it. In the note he left, there is no self-pity. There is just the request about the beacon and a kind of matter-of-fact acknowledgement of what he is doing and why. He is, in the quiet algebra of Skyrim's tragedies, one of the most genuinely good people in the game. Story 67. Arendor. He used to serve Vermina. He was a priest of the Daedric prince of nightmares and memory theft, and there came a night when the temple they occupied was under attack, and he ran. He left the other priests to die. He carried his fear out of that place, and never went back. He became a priest of Mara. He found the goddess of love, and he gave himself to her service, and he has been trying, for however many years it has been since he ran, to be worth what she asks of him. The people of Dawnstar are being tormented by nightmares. The skull of corruption in Nightcaller Temple is causing them. Arendor is the only person who knows how to stop it, which means he has to go back. He has to walk into the place he abandoned. He has to face what he left behind. His name used to be Casimir. He changed it when he changed who he was. There is a moment in the temple where you can kill him. Vermina, speaking through the skull, will encourage you to do it. She will say he betrayed his brothers. She will say the skull should be claimed rather than destroyed. She will make her case in the seductive language of power and grievance. If you don't kill him, if you let him complete the ritual, if you stand with him while he does the hardest thing he has done since he ran, Arendor becomes a companion. He will follow you. He is, quietly, one of the best companions in the game. A man who is genuinely trying to become better, and who has found, in you, someone who believes he can. The guilt he carries is not decorative, it is the engine of his transformation. He is trying to be worth the name he gave himself. Story 68. Full-time. He is at the Nightgate Inn, which is between Dawnstar and Windhelm, which is to say he is in the middle of nowhere and he is drinking. He appears to be nothing more than a sad old drunk. He carries a blade sword. If you know what that means, you understand immediately. The The Blades were hunted almost to extinction after the Great War. The Thalmor made finding them a priority. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to the Order were tracked down and killed, one by one, until most of them were gone. Esbern survived. Fulltime survived. Esbern survived by hiding in the Ratway and staying sharp and never letting his guard down for 20 years. Fulltime survived by sitting at a bar in the middle of nowhere and drinking until he couldn't remember what he was afraid of. They both made it. The methods were different. The innkeeper says he drinks to forget. He doesn't say what, specifically. Maybe it's the hunt. Maybe it's the friends he lost. Maybe it's the specific texture of a life, spent in service to something that then collapsed and left him with nothing to serve. He is alive. He is not okay. He is, in the specific language, of people who have survived things they shouldn't have. Just getting through the time. Story. 69. Sadia. She says her name is Sadia. Her real name is Iman. Two men are looking for her in Skyrim. They are Alik'r warriors from Hammerfell. She is hiding in the Bannered Mare in Whiterun, working as a server, calling herself someone else, and hoping they don't find her. When you locate her, she tells you that the warriors are Thalmor agents using Alik'r mercenaries, that she spoke out against the Dominion in Hammerfell, and that they want to silence her. She begs you to help her escape. The Alik leader, Kamatu, tells you that she is a traitor, that she sold the city of Tanith to the Aldmeri Dominion during the Great War, that she is wanted to face justice for her crimes. Both stories have problems. The specific timeline Kamatu describes would require Sadia to have been a very young child when she committed the treason he attributes to her. The Hammerfell in his account doesn't match the Hammerfell of the game's actual lore, which successfully repelled the Dominion decades before the game begins. If you side with Kamatu and turn Sadia over to him, her ashes appear in Whiterun's Hall of the Dead. She was not taken for trial. She was killed. But Sadia lies easily. She uses a false name. She has multiple aliases. Her story is also imperfect. The quest gives you no truth, only competing claims, and forces you to make a judgment based on incomplete information, which is exactly how most judgments about people have to be made. Most people in bad situations are doing the best they can, and the best they can sometimes involves being less than honest with a stranger who might turn them in. The uncertainty is the point. It is uncomfortable, and it is supposed to be. Story 70. Sissel of Rorikstead. She is a child. She lives with her father, Lemkill, who is not a warm man. He favors her twin sister Britti, and makes no particular effort to conceal this. Sissel bears it with the specific endurance of a child who has decided that the best way through is to wait. Juan Minette, the elderly Breton healer who settled in Rorikstead with Rorik after the war, has noticed Sissel. He is teaching her magic in secret. Small things at first, candle flames, simple spells. But there is the suggestion, in their conversations if you eavesdrop on them, that her talent goes further. He tells her they must keep it secret, that no one would understand. Whether this is protective or concerning depends on how you read the situation. In Skyrim, a child with magical talent being quietly educated by an older man in secret exists in a space that could be entirely benign. An old soldier and healer passing on knowledge to a gifted child who would otherwise have no one to learn from. It could be something else. The game doesn't resolve this. What is certain is that Sissel is surviving Rorikstead in the way children survive difficult situations, by finding the one thing in her environment that feels like an opening and holding on to it. Story 71. Lemkill. He is a bad father. He says unfair things to Sissel in her earshot. He favors Britta because Britta reminds him of her mother, who is dead, and Sissel doesn't, and he has decided that this is a reasonable basis for how he distributes his attention. He is not a villain. He is a man who is grieving in the most destructive possible direction, which is away from the children who need him and toward the one who mirrors the loss. He will probably not change. He is too set in the patterns of his hurt. Sissel will either find a way out of Rorikstead eventually, or she won't, and either outcome will have been shaped by the particular shape of her father's grief. Story 72. Ennis. He is a farmer in Rorikstead, and he is deeply irritated about goats. The night you wake from your drinking contest with Sam Gaven in A Night to Remember, one of the things you have apparently done in your blackout is steal his goat Gleda and trade her to a giant. His outrage about this is complete and genuine and extremely funny. And then, if you take a step back, somewhat melancholy. This is a man in a town that might be harboring a Daedric cult, where the crops never fail in ways that draw low-level, unsettled attention, where the soul gems are plentiful and the livestock die more than they should. He tends his farm. He gets upset when someone takes his goat. He maintains normalcy in what may be a deeply abnormal place, because normalcy is all he has, and he is holding on to it. Part 8. Mages, Scholars, and the Curious. The College of Winterhold sits at the far end of a thin bridge above the sea. Half of Winterhold has fallen into the water. The college is still there. The locals regard it with the specific hostility of people who have decided that the organization that survived the disaster that killed their city is probably responsible for the disaster that killed their city. There is no evidence for this. The college holds classes between 1 in the afternoon and 3, weather and draconic interruptions permitting. Story 73. The Augur of Dunlane. He was a student. This is the thing that is easy to lose. In the blue light of the chamber where he exists now, in the way he speaks with the detached authority of something that has been present in a location for a very long time. He was a student. He had a name. He had ambitions, probably, specific things he wanted to learn and understand, and do with the understanding. He was experimenting with something beyond what he could safely handle. The accident, when it came, was complete. It transformed him into what he is now: pure, magical energy, aware, conscious, capable of perception and speech, and something that functions like wisdom. Trapped in this room, he cannot leave. He can only be consulted. The college uses him. He has knowledge. He has accumulated it during his transformation, during the years of existing as something that perceives magic directly, rather than studying it from outside. He is valuable, and he is here. Every day, in this room, consulted and then left alone again. He warns you about ambition, about seeking power without understanding the cost, about how the cost can arrive in forms you didn't prepare for and can't reverse. He speaks from experience. His warning is the warning of someone who made the mistake at the center of his existence, and now has nothing to do with the centuries except watch other people approach the same edge he went over. Story 74. Arnie Ilgain. He was trying to understand the Dwemer. Specifically, he was trying to understand why they vanished, what Kagranak did with the tools at the heart of the construct, what happened in that moment at the Battle of Red Mountain. He had access to one of the tools. He had a soul gem instead of the actual heart of Lorkhan, which he apparently believed was a sufficient substitute. It was not a sufficient substitute. He performed the ritual. He vanished. He replicated the experiment that destroyed an entire civilization and did it in a College of Winterhold laboratory, alone, without telling anyone specifically what he was trying to do. His shade sometimes appears to help you. It has the specific quality of a ghost that is not entirely at rest, that has found itself in a condition it did not intend, and is making what use it can of the form it's stuck in. He is helpful. He is quiet. He became a casualty of his own research. There is something in that which the college, an institution that runs on the premise that knowledge is worth pursuing, has to navigate very carefully. At what point does the pursuit of understanding become recklessness? At what point does the cost outweigh what is gained? Arniel did not ask those questions loudly enough. He is the answer to them now. Story 75. Onmund. He is a Nord student at the College of Winterhold, and both of those things are unusual in the same direction. Nords, broadly, distrust magic. It is part of the culture, the preference for strength you can see and touch and swing, the wariness of things that work through mechanisms you cannot fully observe. Onmund comes from a family that holds these views. He came to the college anyway. He believed his gift was real and that it deserved to be developed, and the only way to develop it was to do the thing his family considered shameful. He lost something in making that choice. He can't go home the same way. There is a distance now between him and his family that his presence here created, and it will not close easily. He asks you to help him recover something of his family's that he traded to Enther in a moment of desperation. The item matters less than the reason. He needed it to feel connected to the people he left. Even in the place he chose, he needs a thread back to the place he came from. Story 76. Brelina Marion. She is Dunmer, from a house in Morrowind that has a proud, magical tradition. She is at the college to learn things her family's tradition can't teach her. She experiments on you with a spell that goes wrong. The apology afterward is genuine and slightly horrified. She is not bad at magic. She is thorough in a way that doesn't always account for unexpected variables, which is another way of saying she is at the stage where she is still learning the difference between understanding a spell in theory and understanding it in practice. Her family expects things from her, not just skill, but a specific kind of skill, applied in a specific direction. She is trying to become both the mage the college wants and the Marion her family expects, and those two things do not entirely overlap. Story 77. Jizargo. He will tell you, with complete confidence and some justification, that he is the best student at the college. He is probably right, in the narrow sense. He is talented. He is driven. He is also capable of casual recklessness that he does not fully recognize as recklessness, because the mistakes haven't caught up to him yet. The flame cloak scrolls he gives you to test on undead work somewhat differently on undead than he expected. He will apologize for this and seem genuinely troubled by it in a way that suggests he is underneath the performance of confidence, capable of actual reflection. He will never admit to being troubled, but it's there. Story 78. Mirabelle Irvine. She runs the college, operationally. Savos Aren is the archmage, but Mirabelle is the one who keeps the institution functioning day to day, who manages the students and the staff, and the relationships with the outside world that the college needs to maintain. She is protective of the college in the way of someone who has been defending it against an unreasonable amount of external hostility for a long time. The people of Winterhold blame the college for the Great Collapse, the disaster that took half the city into the sea. There is no evidence the college caused this. The hostility persists regardless. Mirabelle has been handling that hostility for years, with a combination of firmness and patience that suggests she has made peace with never being forgiven for something the college didn't do. She dies during the main quest line. The specifics of her death are abrupt and occur in the chaos of events that happen quickly. She doesn't get a proper goodbye. She deserved more than that. Story 79. Savos Aren. He was a student once, too. He went on an expedition with other students to Labyrinthian. He is the only one who came back. The magic he used to ensure his survival required the sacrifice of the others. He bound them with their knowledge and partial consent to serve as barriers against the horrors inside the ruin. They have been there ever since, maintaining their function, their voices reduced to echoes when you pass through on your own mission. He became archmage. He built a distinguished career. He kept his secret. The cost of his survival was other people's indefinite imprisonment, and he carried that cost forward and built a life on top of it, and the college never knew. Story 80. Sybil Stentor. She is the court wizard of solitude. She has been serving the Jarls of Hoffingar for over a century. She is a vampire. Most of the court knows or suspects. She has been there through multiple rulers. She remembers things that are in history books. She is, from a purely practical standpoint, an extraordinarily valuable advisor. The knowledge she has accumulated over a century of paying attention to Nordic politics is irreplaceable. She feeds carefully. She takes what she needs from willing donors who have various reasons for cooperating. She has decided, at some point in the last 100 years, that civilization was worth the effort of maintaining, that the alternative to being what she is inside a functioning court is being what she is outside of one, and outside is worse. She tells you, matter-of-factly, that Torrig would have sided with Ulfric if Ulfric had asked rather than challenged. She watched Torrig die. She has watched many things die. She continues to be precise and useful and slightly unsettling, and solitude continues to function. Part 9. Solstheim's exiled and enslaved. Solstheim is an island of ash and memory. It was under imperial jurisdiction for most of its history, but after the Red Year devastated Morrowind, it was ceded to the Dunmer as somewhere to rebuild. They built. They are still building. The ash from Red Mountain drifts over everything. Story 81. Neloth. He is several centuries old. He is arrogant in the comprehensive way of someone who has been the smartest person in most rooms for long enough that they've stopped questioning whether the calibration might be slightly off. He is also, underneath the performance of contemptuous superiority, genuinely curious. He loves learning things. He loves the mechanisms of magic, the way reality organizes itself under sufficient study, the satisfaction of understanding something that nobody else has understood yet. He has no particular interest in other people's feelings. This has served him well in Telvanni politics, which is structured around the assumption that other people's feelings are vectors of manipulation rather than things deserving consideration. What Neloth has instead of warmth is competence, and he will extend that competence to you if you prove yourself worth it, which means being useful and capable and not requiring emotional maintenance. He had a steward, Verona, who kept his tower running. She disappeared. When you find her body and report back to him, his response is not grief, exactly, but there is something there, a recognition of loss that he doesn't have the vocabulary for or the framework to express in the way that most people would. He will never say he misses her. He will say she was efficient. In his register, that is the highest available praise. Story 82. Loril Morvain. He is the counselor of Raven Rock, the highest authority on Solstheim under the Dunmer structure. He has been governing this ash-covered outpost for years, maintaining the balance between the demands of House Redoran above him, the needs of the people below him, and the constant low-grade pressure of a hostile environment. He carries a weight that the game shows in subtle ways, in the way he speaks about the mine and the ebony and the economics of a settlement that survives only as long as it remains economically viable to the house that controls it. He has made decisions that were not easy to make. He has kept people alive who might otherwise not have survived. His advisor, Adril Arano, is deeply loyal to him, loyal in the specific way of someone who saw what Laeral did during the hardest years and decided that this was a man worth protecting completely. Story 83. Adril Arano. He watches everything. He has decided that his function is to be the filter between Laeral and the dangers that the counselor's more open nature might not see in time. He is suspicious. He is quick to identify threats. He is, in the particular grammar of this kind of role, willing to do the less clean things so that the man he protects doesn't have to. If you investigate the conspiracy against Loril, Adril will look at you for a long time before he decides whether to trust you. He has trusted people before. The track record on that is mixed. He is hard to like and entirely understandable once you know what he has spent his career protecting. Story 84. The Miners of the Retching Netch. There are miners in Raven Rock who drink at the local inn and talk in the way people who do difficult physical labor in difficult conditions talk, which is to say, they complain about everything and they mean none of it. The mine has been closed for years before the Dragonborn arrives. The ebony ran out, or appeared to. The economic foundation of the settlement went with it. These are people who stayed when the work dried up, who built lives here thorough enough that leaving wasn't the obvious choice, who are now in the specific limbo of people in dying communities, who haven't decided yet whether to stay or go. They are waiting to see what happens. They drink while they wait. They talk. When the mine reopens, when the ebony becomes accessible again through the intervention of the Dragonborn, their relief is not celebration. It is too tired for celebration. It is just the sound of something that was about to end being given more time. Story 85. Wolf Wildblood. His brother became a bear. Majni, Wolf's brother, was a skull hunter who encountered something strange in the northern wilderness of Solstheim and was transformed. He now lives as a bear. He has been a bear for long enough that the question of whether there's enough of Majni left inside the bear to rescue is one that Wolf circles but cannot resolve. He feeds the bear. He goes to where the bear roams, and he brings food, and he talks to it, because it is his brother, and because doing nothing is intolerable. The Skal are a people accustomed to the strangeness of the world. They live in a place where the boundaries between the mundane and the supernatural are thin and frequented by things that blur them. But this is still Wolf's brother, still the specific person he grew up with, whose face he can't see anymore in the shape of an animal that looks at him and doesn't answer. He waits. He feeds the bear. He does not know what else to do. Story 86. Freya. She is the daughter of the Skal village shaman. She is the one who goes to find the Dragonborn because her village is under threat, and her father is among those afflicted. She is the capable one, the practical one, the one who goes out when everyone else is frozen. What the narrative doesn't dwell on is what it costs to be that person, to be the one who can still move when everyone you love is stopped. The capacity for action is a gift in a crisis and a burden in everything surrounding the crisis, because it means the crisis becomes yours to carry. She carries it. She doesn't put it down. She finds you, and she works with you, and she does what needs to be done. And underneath all of that is a young woman who is terrified for her father and holding the terror in one hand while using the other to keep fighting. Story 87. Storn Cragstrider. He is the shaman. He is the keeper of the Skald's sacred knowledge, the all-maker traditions, the relationship between the people and the land. He has kept a secret for a long time. He knows more about Mirok's history than he shares initially. He held knowledge that could have helped faster and made a choice about what to hold and what to reveal and when. When the moment comes that requires the knowledge to be given fully, he gives it. He knows what it will cost. He gives it anyway. The death of a person who understood things that nobody else understands is a specific kind of loss. The things they carried go with them. Part 10. The Last Ghosts of Skyrim. There are people in Skyrim who are so old that they have become more memory than person, so battered by history that the line between survivor and ghost is blurred, so committed to something that their continued existence is, in some sense, the last evidence that the thing they committed to was real. Story 88. Esbern. 20 years in the Ratway. 20 years hiding below Riften, in a space that smells like the canal, and rats and old fear. He kept his books. He kept his notes. He kept his obsessive, careful watch on the skies and the records, watching for the signs that the dragons were coming back, watching for something that everyone else had decided was a fantasy of an old man who had been hiding too long. He was right. He watched the blades die. He watched the Thalmor hunt them down, one by one, watched the organization that had been his family and his life, and his reason for being be systematically destroyed. He survived by being invisible, by being in the Ratway, someone nobody thought it was worth finding. The paranoia he displays when you finally reach him is not madness. It is the specific psychological condition of someone who has spent 2 decades knowing that people want to kill them and being unable to afford the luxury of assuming otherwise. He has false locks and escape routes and layers of security that seem excessive until you understand what happened to everyone who didn't have them. He is brilliant, this old man, in a dark room with his books. He knows things about dragons that nobody else knows. He has been keeping that knowledge alive for 20 years, with no one to share it with, because sharing it required someone else to believe him, and no one did, until now. Story 89. Delphine. She chose a different adaptation than Esbern. She stayed sharp. She stayed in motion. She took an inn in a small town and made herself unremarkable. The innkeeper, who has been there long enough that she blends into the wall, and she watched and she waited, and she maintained her capability and her edge and her refusal to accept that the blades were finished. She is difficult. She gives you orders. She demands proof of things before she'll extend any trust. And even when she extends trust, she's watching to see whether she was wrong to. She was shaped by a war that took everyone she knew and left her carrying the organization forward alone. That experience doesn't produce warmth and easy collaboration. It produces Delphine, capable, relentless, and convinced, at a very deep level, that the only thing you can count on is what you can verify yourself. Her insistence that Paarthurnax must die is the expression of this. She cannot trust a dragon. She has fought dragons her whole life. The idea that one of them has spent centuries in peaceful meditation is not a thing she can metabolize. She has too many dead friends for it. She is not wrong that dragons have historically been the enemy. She is also incapable of updating her framework when the enemy turns out to be more complicated than the framework allows. Both things are true. Neither cancels the other. Story 90. Paarthurnax. He is the oldest thing you will speak to in the main quest line. He sat at the peak of the throat of the world and watched everything. The dragon war, the mortals learning the Thuum, the slow fading of his siblings, the long silence between Alduin's banishment and the current era. He sat and he meditated, and he fought, every day, against the nature that his existence was built around. Dragons are dominance made flesh. They are designed, at a cosmological level, to rule. It is not metaphor. It is the specific shape of what a dragon is. Paarthurnax knows this about himself. He has known it for thousands of years. He has spent those thousands of years doing the opposite of what his nature demands, sitting still on a mountain, teaching the few mortals who came to him, refusing the thing he was built for. He will tell you, if you ask, that he has a terrible desire to dominate, that it lives in him always, that the meditation and the discipline and the solitude are not a solution. They are a daily practice, renewed every morning, against an adversary that never gets tired. The Blades want you to kill him for what he did during the Dragon War, for the years before his defection, when he served Alduin and did what dragons do. He doesn't contest the accusation. He committed those acts. He knows it. The question is what the present is owed by the past and what the past is worth in light of the present. He will accept your judgment, whatever it is, without fighting back. He is the most powerful living being in Skyrim, and he will let you kill him if you choose to, because he has decided that controlling his own nature includes not using his power to avoid consequences he deserves. That decision, the choice to be accountable for what you are at your worst, made in full awareness of what you're capable of, may be the most remarkable thing about him. Story 91. The Headless Horseman. He appears at night, on certain roads, riding silently toward the north. He never stops, he never attacks, he never speaks. He is a figure on a horse without a head, riding through the darkness, and if you follow him long enough, he will lead you to Hamvir's Rest, a small tomb in the hills. He was buried there. Who he was, why he rides, what keeps him tethered to this particular road and this particular journey is something the game withholds entirely. He is pure atmosphere, pure mystery, a ghost who is committed to a route that only he understands the significance of. Some things in the world of Skyrim are not there to be understood. They are there to remind you that the world is older than you are, and that it contains things that don't require your comprehension to be real. He rides. Every night, on certain roads, in certain winds, he rides. Story 92. Svafnir. He was a bard who accused Olaf One-Eye of fraud. Olaf was a legendary Nord king who claimed to have single-handedly captured a dragon named Numenex and brought it to Whiterun, where it was imprisoned. This story became the foundation of much in Olaf's authority, the evidence that he was the kind of man who deserved to rule. Svafnir, who was either braver or more reckless than his contemporaries, wrote a poem arguing that Olaf had not captured the dragon alone, that the story was exaggerated or fabricated, that the king was claiming credit for something that hadn't happened the way he claimed. Olaf had him imprisoned and executed. Svafnir's spirit has been hovering around the ruins of his imprisonment ever since, unwilling to fully pass on, waiting for someone to help him complete what his death interrupted. When you find him and help him face Olaf's shade in Dead Men's Respite, he is able to finally let go. He waited out the centuries. He waited for someone to help him be right about the thing he died for. He made it to Sovngarde. The truth was worth the wait, for him. Story 93. Torrig. In Sovngarde. You meet him in the mists. He is not angry. He is sad in the quiet way of someone who had time, in the drifting limbo of the mist, to think about what happened and arrive at something that isn't quite forgiveness, but is in that direction. He says, to the ghost of Ulfric, if you encounter that version of Sovngarde, that Ulfric did not need to challenge him, that the challenge was unnecessary, that the killing was unnecessary, that all of it was unnecessary. He says this without hatred. He says it the way you say something when you've had a very long time, in a very quiet place to think about it, and you've arrived at the truth of it, and the truth is just true, without malice or drama. He wanted to be a good king. He was going to be a good king. He knew he was young and inexperienced, and he was paying attention and learning. He had a wife he loved. He had a kingdom that he was beginning to understand. He was murdered for political symbolism. He has had the mists to be alone with that fact, and he is still here, still himself, still the young man who was going to be a good king. Story 94. Kodlak in Sovngarde. If Alduin is defeated before you complete the companion's questline and cure Kodlak's spirit, you can find him in the Hall of Valor. He made it. His soul found its way here, past whatever obstacles the beast blood put between him and this place, and he is at the feast with the honored dead. If you speak to him, he is at peace. The anxiety that you saw in his private journals, the urgency of the research into the cure, the weight of knowing that he might not have enough time, all of that is gone. He is here. The particular grace of Kodlak's story is that it ends with what he wanted. Not everyone's does. Story 95. Ulfric in Sovngarde. If you kill him during the Civil War quest line and then complete the main quest, he is in the mists. He has had time to think. He has watched what Alduin's mist does to the souls wandering in it, including the souls of the men who died in his war. He has realized what he was providing, all this time, to a world eater. He says he fought so that all the fighting he'd done wouldn't be for nothing. The heartbreak of that line is not that he was wrong to fight. The heartbreak is the suspicion in it, the creeping awareness of a man who has always been certain, suddenly standing in the fact of what his certainty produced and finding the math doesn't balance. He fought for something real. He was also a tool for something that wanted him to fight. Both of those things are true. In the mist, with nothing left to do but exist with them, he is learning what it feels like when the certainty runs out. Story 96. The Ebony Warrior. He is Redguard. He appears when you have reached the level of mastery that most people never achieve. He finds you, introduces himself calmly, and explains that he is ready to die. He has done everything. He has fought every creature worth fighting. He has reached a level of skill that most living beings will never touch. He has nothing left to accomplish. The only thing that would be meaningful now, the only death that would carry the weight of what he has lived, is to be killed by someone at least as capable as he is. He is not suicidal in the way most people understand that word. He is someone for whom the cultural framework of his belief has produced a specific terminal desire, death in worthy combat, which earns passage to Sovngarde. He is trying to earn his afterlife. He uses shouts. He uses powerful equipment. He will hit you with everything he has, because anything less would be an insult to both of you. He has been waiting for someone capable of giving him what he's asking for. When you kill him, you have given him exactly what he wanted. Whether that makes you the instrument of his death or the agent of his fulfillment depends on how you think about those things, and the game leaves the thinking to you. Story 97. Cicero's first journal entry. The earliest journal, the one from before. He is in Cyrodiil. He has just completed a contract. He is good at his work, and he knows it, and he is, at this stage, comfortable in his life and his role. There is even humor in it, a lightness, the specific ease of someone who has found the thing they're designed for. This is who he was before the Brotherhood fell apart, a skilled professional who enjoyed his work, who had community, who had the structure of the organization around him. Read from the perspective of the later journals, the ones where he is alone, and the language has gotten stranger, and the boundaries between speaking to the Night Mother and speaking to himself have dissolved. This early entry is devastating. He was a person. He was a normal, functional, even happy person in a context that most people would not recognize as compatible with normalcy. And then that context was taken from him, one death and one abandonment at a time. Story 98. Majol the Lioness. She is one of the few genuinely good people in Riften. She says this openly. She thinks Riften is corrupt. She thinks Maven Blackbriar's influence is a cancer on the city. She will tell you this without solicitation. She is not wrong. She would have left, but Aaron saved her. She was wounded, near death, in a ruin, and Aaron carried her out and nursed her back to health, and now she stays because she owes him, and because she believes that leaving Riften to its own corruption is something she cannot do with a clear conscience. Aaron follows her everywhere. He is devoted to her in a way that is, depending on your interpretation, deep platonic loyalty, or something more than that which she has not quite acknowledged. Either way, he is always there, slightly too close, reflecting her light back. She is one of the best companions in the game, and she knows exactly what she is and what she stands for, and she doesn't compromise it for anything. In a game full of moral gray, she is a sharp, clear line, not because the world is simple, but because she has decided her principles are non-negotiable, and she is willing to pay the cost of that. Story 99. Ranmir after the letter. He is in the inn. He reads the letter you brought him. In it, Isabel explains that she left to make money for them, to solve the problem that was putting pressure on everything, to do the one thing she thought she could do that would help. She died doing it. the anger goes out of him when he reads it. The specific anger of someone who felt abandoned, who spent months constructing a story about being left, who used that story to justify the drinking and the withdrawal and the general project of making himself unavailable to everyone. The story was wrong. She didn't leave him, she went for him. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a wound that hardens and one that has to be grieved fresh. He has to start the grief over, from the beginning, without the anger to protect him from it. Story 100, Vilmir Inn, the last table. In the Vilmir Inn in Ivarstead, there is a table near the fire. It is the table where pilgrims stop before the climb. They eat their last warm meal at this elevation, have their last drink of something that isn't melted snow, sit with the mountain ahead of them, and try to prepare for whatever is up there. The table has no name. No particular quest happens at it. Nobody interesting sits there that you need to talk to. But if you sit at that table, if you stop and actually sit at it as a player, and look up at the mountain outside, and think about the people who have passed through this room, on their way to whatever they were going toward, something happens in your understanding of the place. This is where the world starts, or ends, or both. This is the hinge of ordinary and extraordinary, the place where the everyday things, the warm food, the fire, the innkeeper, give way to the exceptional. Most of the people who sat at this table are not in any story the game tells. They were pilgrims and travelers and soldiers and merchants and people who needed to cross the mountains. They sat here, and they ate, and they went. Their names are not recorded anywhere. The table is still there. Stories 101 through 120, the ones the game doesn't name. There are mass graves in Helgen. The attack happened suddenly, at the beginning of everything. A town full of people, not soldiers, not heroes, just the inhabitants of a small imperial outpost, was destroyed in minutes. The people who died in Helgen are not named. There are no quests about them. The game uses their destruction as the starting gun for everything that follows and then moves on. But they were there. A baker who had been in Helgen for 20 years. A family who had come through on a trading route and stopped for the night. Children who had never seen a dragon, the man who ran the inn. The guard who had been on duty for 6 hours and had 2 more to go. The prisoner who was about to be executed and died instead of dragons and fire rather than a headsman's axe, which is not an improvement in any direction. A woman who was due to give birth in 3 weeks and had been waiting for that day with the specific mix of terror and joy that those weeks contain. These people are not commemorated anywhere in the game. The main quest uses their city as a catalyst and proceeds. The ruins of Helgen are still there, if you go back, fire-blackened and empty, and there is nobody to mourn what happened there, because the people who would have done the mourning were inside it. Every war, every catastrophe, every grand event that history records is surrounded by the unnumbered ones. The people who were there when it happened and didn't survive to tell anyone about it. Skyrim, if you walk slowly through it, if you read everything and listen to everything and stop at the unmarked graves, is full of them. The ones the game doesn't need you to know about. The ones who were living their lives right up until the moment they weren't. The Dunmer woman in the Grey Quarter who has been in Windhelm for 30 years and whose grandchildren have never seen Morrowind. The Argonian dock worker in Windhelm who is not allowed inside the city walls and sleeps in a storage shed by the harbor in the cold. The child in Honor Hall Orphanage who is not Aventus Aretino, who does not have a family home to go back to, who will not summon the Dark Brotherhood, who will just be in that orphanage until Grelod's replacement decides their fate. The soldiers on both sides who died in fields between holds that don't have names. The bard who plays at a tavern in Markarth and will play there for the rest of his life, his music never leaving the walls of that room, his name never appearing in any record of anything. The old woman in Falkreath who walks to the graveyard every morning to speak to someone who has been there for years. The merchant on the road between Solitude and Morthal who is traveling alone, which is dangerous, but who cannot afford an escort, and who makes this calculation every time. They are everywhere. The unnamed, the unnumbered, the people who are living full lives in the background of a story that isn't about them. Skyrim is a world built for heroes. It always has been. The quests are for heroes. The shouts are for heroes. The fate of the world rests on a specific person with a specific gift, but the world is full of everyone else. And if you take the time to look at them, really look, The way you looked at Narfi on the wrong side of the bridge, or Isabel at the bottom of the river, or Cicero in the dark with the Night Mother's silence for company, you find that the everyone else is where most of the truth lives. Not in the fire of a dragon's breath, not in the moment the World Eater falls, in the letter that never got sent, in the necklace at the bottom of a river, in the broken walls of a house on the wrong side of a bridge where a man is still waiting, in his particular way, to say goodbye. In the lighthouse beacon that burns all night, because a man who died trying to save his children asked that his ashes be placed there so he could keep a light burning for travelers. That light is still on. That light is still on. Part 11. The ones who almost made it. There is a category of tragedy that Skyrim returns to again and again, quietly, in the margins. The people who came so close to something good, who had a plan, who did everything they were supposed to do, and were stopped by the one thing they couldn't control. Story 101. Kataraya. She is not a person in the game, she is a ship. The Kataraya is the Emperor's vessel, anchored in the waters outside Solitude during the events of the Dark Brotherhood questline. It is where the Emperor goes when he wants to be unreachable, away from the city and its politics and the people who want things from him. The ship was named after an empress, Kataraya I, who ruled during a period that required a very specific kind of ruler, capable, ruthless, willing to do what the empire needed without requiring that what the empire needed also be what was morally obvious. She was those things. She was also deeply loved by her husband, Cassander, who by most accounts was a mild and gentle man, and who, by choosing her, chose a life of constant political fire that he was not constitutionally suited for. The ship carries her name across water centuries after her death. That is a kind of immortality. It is also a monument to the specific loneliness of people who are so good at holding power that the people who love them can never quite reach the person underneath it. Story 102. Brandshay and the question he will never answer. After his time in prison, unjust and unexplained, he returns to his market stall. He has a question he thinks about. He knows he was adopted. He knows his birth parents are unknown to him, that there is a chapter of his history before the family that raised him, which he cannot read. He hires people, occasionally, to look into it. Nothing comes back. What he doesn't know is that the answer exists. That Glover Mallory in Raven Rock is his father, that there was a connection there, that life circumstances separated before it could be established, that somewhere in the gap between Riften's Market and an ash-covered island, two people who are family have lived entirely separate lives without knowing. You can close this gap in Dragonborn if you play carefully. You can bring the information. You can let them know. The reunion, such as it is, happens quietly and with the restrained quality of people who are not sure what to do with information that arrived this many years late. But most players never do. Most players pass through Raven Rock, speak to Glover Mallory, complete the relevant tasks, and don't carry the information back to Riften. Brandshay goes through his life not knowing. Glover goes through his not knowing either. The connection exists. The knowledge of it lives in your inventory or your journal or your memory, and just never travels where it could matter. Story 103. Ayla and the Hunt. She runs. After Skjor dies, after the Silver Hand has been gutted by her methodical campaign against them, after the immediate anger has been spent on something concrete and achievable, she runs. Not away from anything, exactly. Just across the tundra, across the heath, in the wolf form, in the pure animal state where there is nothing to feel except the ground and the cold and the speed. There is a reason people run. It is not avoidance, exactly. It is the body's attempt to give the mind something to do with what the mind cannot process through stillness. Movement as a form of working through. She runs, she comes back, she trains. She is exactly who she was before, because she has decided that who she was before is non-negotiable, but she is quieter in ways that people who knew her well enough would notice. Skjor knew her well enough. He noticed everything. She is learning to carry something without anyone to help her hold it. Story 104. The Stormcloak Soldier in the Reach. The Civil War questline sends you to locations throughout Skyrim to capture or defend specific strategic positions. In the Reach, the fight is particularly brutal. The Forsworn complicate everything. The holds are contested. The soldiers on both sides are dying for ground that the Forsworn consider theirs, regardless of which imperial or Nordic authority claims it. There are Stormcloak soldiers in these battles whose names you learn briefly, in the heat of combat, and then forget. They are characters, technically. They have voice lines. They have some approximation of a story. One of them, if you play the Imperial side of the questline, you will help kill. He was fighting for the same thing Ralof was fighting for, the same cultural identity, the same right to worship. He had the same reasons. He died for them, in a field in the Reach, for an argument that the Thalmor consider a useful fire, and which neither side has the perspective to recognize as what it is. His name was whatever the game assigned him. His death registered as a marker, moving from red to nothing on your compass. That is how most deaths work. That is what war does with names. Story 105. Lucan Valerius. He runs the Riverwood Trader. He is irritated about a golden claw. Bandits broke into his shop and stole it. Not just any object. The golden claw, a specific artifact that Lucan's family has had for a very long time, that has meaning beyond its monetary value, that represents something about who they are and where they came from. He is the kind of man who built a life around a specific place and a specific set of objects and a specific identity as the person who keeps those things. The shop is not just a business. It is the visible evidence of who Lucan is. When the claw is stolen, he doesn't report it to the guards. He can't. He would have to admit it was there, explain what it's worth, deal with the questions. Instead, he asks you, a stranger who walked in off the road, to help him. He trusts you with this, with the specific vulnerability of asking for help, recovering the thing that represents everything he has built. His sister Camilla is more famous in the community for her romantic difficulties. Lucan is just the shopkeeper. He is just the man who wanted his claw back. He is the man who wanted his claw back, because the claw was, in its way, his family. Story 106. Thorold Greymane. He is missing. His family, the Greymane clan of Whiterun, is at war with the Battleborns in the specific Cold War way of adjacent families who have disagreed about the Civil War and made their disagreement personal and permanent. The Greymanes are Stormcloak. The Battleborns are Imperial. The two families no longer speak. Thorold is the son of Fralia Greymane. He was taken by the Thalmor. Not killed, taken. He is alive somewhere, in a Thalmor facility, because he knows something they want to extract, or because making him disappear serves some purpose they have. His mother knows he is alive. The official story is that he died in battle. She does not believe the official story. She has a mother's certainty about this, the specific conviction of someone who has spent every day since his disappearance feeling the wrongness of the death narrative, against the grain of what she knows. If you help her find him and free him, she asks you to tell him to run, not to come back. Not to come home, just to run somewhere safe, somewhere the Thalmor can't find him again. She loves him enough to send him away from her. That is the full measure of it. Story 107. Fralia Greymane. She sells jewelry in Whiterun's market. She is old, she is proud, she is surrounded by a feud that she maintains with the same energy she puts into everything, because pride demands full commitment. The feud is exhausting. It costs her social relationships that she might value. It costs her proximity to people who have known her for decades. She maintains it because abandoning it would feel like abandoning her family's position, and her family's position is part of who she is. Underneath all of that is just a mother who is afraid for her son and has no channel for the fear except the careful management of her daily life. She sells jewelry. She watches the road. She counts the days. Story 108. Bercy Honeyhand. He is a merchant in Riften's market. He borrowed money from the Thieves' Guild. This is not an arrangement that ends well for borrowers. When you come to collect, he tries to be defiant, and then he is not. There is a specific quality to the defeat of someone who is proud enough to borrow from dangerous people and not proud enough to sustain the defiance required to face the consequences of that. He pays. He resents it. He pays again. He goes back to selling things. The market continues. Riften continues. Maven Blackbriar continues. He is a small man in a large system, and the system doesn't care about the scale at which he is trying to survive it. Story 109. Viola Giordano's pamphlets. She made them herself, the warning pamphlets about the butcher. She wrote them and printed them and posted them around Windhelm Stone Quarter. She paid for the materials herself. Nobody asked her to do this. Nobody assigned it. She looked at what was happening to the women of her city, and she decided that someone needed to be making noise, and since no one else was doing it, she would. She is consistently underestimated, mocked, treated as the neighborhood nuisance who won't stop going on about the murders. She is right about everything. The pamphlet is still in the game. You can read it. It is careful and specific and well written. It says, here is what has happened. Here are the victims. Here is the pattern. Here is what needs to be done. It is the work of someone who paid attention and cared enough to act on what they observed. Nobody listened to her until they had to. She was right the whole time. Story 110. The innkeeper of the Moorside Inn in Morthal. Jana runs the inn in Morthal, the marsh city, the place that feels perpetually damp and perpetually under investigation for one supernatural thing or another. She is from Morrowind. She came to Skyrim with nothing and built something. The inn is small and the city is strange, and her clientele is the specific assortment of people who find themselves in Morthal, which is mostly people who are here by necessity rather than choice. She keeps it running. She manages the supplies and the fire and the beds and the food and the careful diplomacy of a business that exists in a town where almost everyone is involved in something uncomfortable. She doesn't discuss Morrowind very much. The Red Year is not something she performs for customers. It is hers. She makes the inn warm. That is the thing she can do. Story 111. Farengar Secret Fire. He is the court wizard of Whiterun, and he is the kind of person who is very good at what he does, and has the personality of someone who knows it, and found his way to the most efficient method of making this clear, which is by treating everyone around him as slightly less capable than they are. He is not entirely wrong about that. He is very capable. He studies hard things. He understands things about the Thuum that very few living scholars do. He will send you to retrieve the Dragonstone, a map of dragon burial sites, from a dungeon full of undead, and he will do it in a tone that implies the errand is slightly beneath discussion. What he doesn't tell you is what the Dragonstone means to him. The years of research that led to him knowing it existed, and knowing where it was, and understanding its significance. He has been working on this. He has been paying attention while everyone else was occupied with the war. He is not going to get any of the credit for what follows. You are the Dragonborn. He is the scholar who pointed you in the right direction. History will remember the pointing, if it remembers anything at all. He knows this. He does the work anyway. Story 112. Endari and Tari. They are Altmer sisters who run Radiant Raiment in Solitude. They have opinions about everyone's clothing. They are not complicated. They are not particularly deep. They sell fine clothing in Skyrim's capital city, and they maintain, in the face of a war and a dragon crisis, and the general instability of everything, the position that presentation matters, and that there is never a valid excuse for poor tailoring. There is something in that, in the specific commitment to refinement during crisis, in the argument, implicit in every interaction with them, that maintaining standards is itself a form of resistance against the forces that would reduce everything to survival and nothing more. They are frustrating, they are snobbish. They are also, in their way, insisting that there is a version of the world where elegance still exists, and it is worth insisting on it. Story 113. Boland the Lumberjack. He is in Falkreath. He doesn't like outsiders. He says this plainly and regularly. He is a Nord in a hold that has a tradition of self-sufficiency, and every person who arrives from somewhere else represents, to Bolund, the dilution of something he values. He is not a bad person in any dramatic sense. He works hard. He does his job. He is loyal to the people he considers his. He has simply decided that the circle of people he considers his is very small, and the criteria for entering it are not negotiable. The tragedy in Boland is not anything that happened to him. It's the life not lived, the connections not made, the people who might have been something to him if he had let them be. The narrowness of his world is the thing he chose, consciously or not, and the cost of that choice is a particular kind of solitude that he would not recognize as solitude, because he filled it so fully with work and certainty. Story 114. Sonir. She is a child in the Greymane family's household. She says things to you sometimes when you walk past, the kind of things children say, observations about the world as it appears to someone small. She has absorbed, without the vocabulary to process it, the tension of her family. She knows the Battleborns are enemies without knowing entirely why. She knows her brother is gone. She knows her grandmother is sad, in a way that doesn't fully resolve. She is growing up inside a grief that nobody has explained to her properly, because she is too young for the explanation, and nobody can wait for her to get older. Story 115. Dagain. He is a beggar in Markarth. He will tell you about Hamal, the priestess at the Temple of Dibella, and the Sibyl, who needs to be found. He provides this information only if you give him something. He is working the angle. He is in a position that requires him to convert information into survival, and he does it without particular shame, or particularly without it either. This is what he has. He is in Markarth, which is a city built into a cliff face, administered by a Jarl who owes his position to conspiracy and silver, full of people who are either forsworn or aware of the forsworn, and making very careful decisions about what they know and don't know. Dagain has no power in that system. He has information. He makes what he can of it. Story 116. Muiri. She is the apprentice at Hobbs Fall Cave. She is the apprentice to Bothala, the alchemist in Markarth. She had a friend once, Nilsine Shattershield, with whom she was close. She had a connection to a man named Alain Dufont. She trusted him. He used that trust to get access to Nilsine's family home and steal from them. The friendship between Muiri and Nilsine did not survive this. The Shattershields blamed Muiri, publicly and humiliatingly. Markarth decided she was complicit. She was not complicit. She was naive, which is not the same thing. But the social mechanics of a city don't often make that distinction carefully. She gives you a contract through the Dark Brotherhood, Alain first, and then, as an optional addition, Nilsine. She wants them both gone. She wants the person who used her and the person who blamed her for being used. One of those is justice. The other is something else, the grief and shame converted into something she can act on. Whether you fulfill both or only one is up to you. She will be in Markarth long after the contract is done, mixing potions, being careful about whom she trusts, carrying the shape of what happens to people who trusted someone they shouldn't have, and paid for it in a currency they never agreed to. Story 117. Old Hrolden Inn, Talos' Shade. There is an inn on the road between Markarth and Rorikstead called Old Hrolden. If you stay in the room called Tiber Septim's Room, the ghost of a man named Halti Earlybeard will be there when you wake. He will call you by his old shield brother's name. He will be confused but not distressed. He is looking for something he left here a very long time ago. Hjalti Earlybeard is, or was, Tiber Septim before he became Tiber Septim. He stayed at this inn as a young warrior, long before the Empire, and the wars, and the ascension to godhood. He left a sword here. He wants it back. You can return it to him. He thanks you. He disappears. A god, before he was a god, was just a young man who stayed in an inn on a cold night and lost his sword and never fully recovered it because he became someone too large to return for small things. His ghost comes back because the small things matter, even when everything else has gotten enormous. The sword he lost as a young man is still worth finding, even after everything. Even for a god, the early things stay real. Story 118. Dervanin. He is the priest of Sheogorath, wandering solitude in a state of religious ecstasy and ordinary concern. His master has been away for a very long time. He stands outside the Blue Palace and he waits, and he asks of every passing person whether they might help him retrieve his lord. His lord is inside a dead man's mind, playing an elaborate and violent game of pretend in the last thoughts of the deceased Emperor Pelagius the Mad. Sheogorath left to do this and then simply didn't come back. The way people who have discovered something genuinely interesting sometimes forget to return from it. Dervanin has been waiting. For how long is unclear. Long enough that the waiting has become most of what he is. When you retrieve his master, there is a scene of reunion that is genuinely affecting. The devoted follower and the capricious lord, one of them having suffered in the waiting, and the other not quite grasping the scale of what it cost. Sheogorath is warm, in his way. He is also completely unaware that the wait was difficult. Gods in Skyrim are like that. They are real, they are powerful, they care, sometimes in their specific ways. But the timescales they operate on are not the timescales of the people who wait for them. Dervanin waited. His master came back. That is the whole story, and it contains everything about what it means to be devoted to something larger than yourself that does not return the devotion in any proportional way. Story 119. Carlia in the Sepulchre. The moment when Nocturnal's twilight sepulchre is restored. Carlia is there. You are there. The ritual is complete, and the skeleton key is back where it belongs, and the guild's luck begins to return, and Gallus has been avenged. She turns and looks at the place where Gallus's spirit appeared, where he had his moment, where he said what he said to her after 25 years of absence. She does not fall apart. She is not that kind of person, and this is not that kind of moment. But there is a quality to her stillness in the aftermath that is worth paying attention to if you are watching carefully. She has been moving for 25 years. She has been in motion because stopping meant sitting with everything, and she could not afford to sit with everything. There was always the next move, the next piece of evidence, the next stage of the case she was building. It is over now. The thing she organized a quarter century of her life around is done. The motion is finished. And in the space where the motion was, there is just a woman standing in a sacred room with the sound of what used to drive her, now quiet. She doesn't know yet what comes next. She stood still in that room, and probably didn't either. Story 120. The very last one. In Riften, in the Ratway, in the Ragged Flagon, there is a bucket. It is a bucket with a candle on it. It is not a quest object. Nobody tells you anything about it. It is just a bucket with a candle that someone placed there at some point for light, in this underground space, where the Thieves Guild came when they needed to be somewhere the world wasn't looking. People sat near that candle. They ate their meals. They argued about jobs. They came back from things that nearly killed them and sat in the candlelight, and were still here. The bucket is a very small monument to continuity, to the fact that people lived their lives in this place, made their homes in this strange underground corner of a city built over a swamp, and found it sufficient, found it, in their way, enough. There is no quest for the bucket. No one explains it. It is just there. Skyrim is full of these objects. The half-eaten meal on a table in an abandoned cottage. The flower placed in front of a grave in a city cemetery, fresh enough that someone brought it recently. The book left open on a desk in a ruin, where everyone is long dead, left at whatever page someone was reading when the world ended. The objects persist. They say, someone was here, someone who was not the hero of anything, not the center of any quest, not the pivot of any dramatic confrontation, just a person who put a candle on a bucket, because the Ratway was dark, and they were going to be here for a while. Just a person who put a flower on a grave, just a person who was reading, and had to stop, and intended to come back. We remember them, here, in this quiet hour before sleep, all of them. The lighthouse keeper and the necklace at the bottom of the river, and the letter that never got sent. The old soldier drinking to forget. The mother waiting for the son to come home. The child alone in the dark, performing a ritual he learned in pieces, because no adult was coming. The bard who was right about the king, and died for it. The warrior on the mountain fighting the same battle every morning for 3,000 years. The bucket, the candle, the small persistent light. We remember all of them. Thank you for being here tonight. If you've made it this far, if you let these stories sit with you in the quiet, then you understand something about Skyrim that the game never makes you sit with intentionally. It is full of people, full of ordinary, extraordinary lives, lived in the margins of a world that spends most of its attention on the extraordinary. Drop a like if this is the kind of night you needed. Subscribe if you want more of them. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is, because I like to think of all of you, scattered across the world, finding a few hours of quiet in the middle of everything. The fire's still burning, the candle's still on the bucket. Sleep well.